Welcome to the Council of the City of Nanaimo here at the Shaw Auditorium on Monday, January the 14th, 2013. I'd like to call the regular meeting of Council to order and just point out that Acting Mayor is Councillor Beswick for this period of time. And we'll start off, Ms. Samra, I believe there's a couple of late items, please.
Yes, there are, Your Worship. First, agenda item 10C, the staff report on the Diana Krall Plaza washroom. Replace pages 79 and 80, schedules A and B. And number 2, agenda item 15A, a motion from Councillor Brennan regarding the Boat Basin Marina. We have 2 delegation requests from Mr. Chris Sorensen and Ms. Michelle Corfield.
Thank you. So if we could ask for an adoption of the agenda as amended.
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
And second, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move into the adoption of the minutes. And at this point for 4A and B, we'll ask if we could move both together.
Move adoption
Thank you.
of the minutes, Your Worship, for December the 17th and January the 3rd.
Correct.
Second the motion.
Moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll go straight down into presentations. And I'd just like to say that we're very pleased tonight to have with us Ms. Kim Carter, the Ombudsman for British Columbia, to provide a presentation regarding the publication entitled Open Meetings Best Practices Guide for Local Governments. And before she starts, I'm just going to make a few comments, if I could, that we have a bit of a time frame, and Ms. Carter as well has some other obligations, and she also has to return to Victoria tonight. So we've allowed about 30 to 35 minutes for the presentation, and we just like people to respect the timeline because she does have some other commitments she has to honor. So having said that, Ms. Carter, welcome, and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Mayor Rutten, and thank you, Council, for the invitation. I'm sorry I can't address everyone, but I'm sure you can hear me and you can see our slide presentation. So I'm delighted to be here to talk about something that our office has produced in the past year, which is a best practices guide for local governments on open meetings. And I'm joined by Mr. Bruce Clark, who's a member of the staff at the Ombudsperson Office. He's the manager of the Health and Local Services team that deals with issues relating to local government, and it's his team that worked to produce this guide. So what I'm just going to do is talk very briefly about our office and how we got involved in this. Turn over to Mr. Clark for some highlights of the report. The report, of course, can be found on our website in its entirety. And then I will close with a little presentation on local government issues that come to our office, generally from across the province, and then open for questions. So if that's suitable, perfect. I'll get started. As I know a number of you know, our office was established in 1979 in British Columbia to provide oversight to ensure fair and reasonable treatment by provincial public authorities. Initially, most of our jurisdiction was over provincial government ministries, but our jurisdiction was expanded in 1993 to 1995, and our office has been providing oversight for local government since 1995, so quite a few years now. And why did we look at doing a guide to open meetings? It's one of the recurring issues that the Health and Local Services team receives complaints about and investigates. And it's really an important issue for transparency and accountability, which is, are hallmarks of good governance. And we also found that a number of local governments had commitments, and this local government goal is, of course, something that you will know better than I, because it's from your strategic plan here in Nanaimo, in which one of the goals of the local government is to be known and earn respect for participatory democracy based on effective consultation and open communications. And what we will do in the presentation, and I'd just like to make the transition, is, of course, the principle for local government meetings is that generally they are open, and it is an exception when they are closed. And so the focus of this best practices guide is to examine when they can be appropriately closed and the procedure for that. So while we're talking about open meetings, you will hear from Bruce Clark very much about when meetings can be closed and what the process is and how that should be dealt with after a meeting has been closed. So I'm going to finish right now and turn over to Bruce, because we're trying very much to keep to your guidelines and your timelines as well, because I know you have other things on your agenda. So I'll turn over to Bruce, who will go through some of the details with you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you, Kim. Good evening. I'd like to start by complimenting the city on the video archiving of council meetings. I know that you've received positive feedback on that initiative over the past few years, but since we're talking about openness and transparency, I just wanted to acknowledge what a nice job you did with that and how well it works. In BC, statutory requirements for open meetings have been in place since 1881 and more or less in their current form since 2003. But despite the long history of open meeting requirements, there's not a lot of case law coming out of BC with respect to the implementation of the open meeting provisions in the community charter. And in the course of investigating and evaluating complaints and talking to local governments and the Ministry of Community, Sport and Cultural Development, we became aware of some common challenges to the implementation of the provisions, as well as some effective ways of resolving them. And the Open Meeting Guide provided a way of sharing some of the information that we thought might be useful. I'm not going to try to summarize the guide, but I will focus on a few points that have generated some interest. In particular, I'm going to be talking about the implementation of the open meeting provisions in the community charter. Division 3 of Part 4 of the Community Charter is entitled Open Meetings, but most of the provisions in that division are actually about closing meetings, and the reason for that is the reason for the title, despite the content, is that open meetings is really the principle and the key principle, and my presentation is going to be similar. It's about open meetings, but I'm going to be the emphasis is really going to be about being as open as possible, even when the closure of a meeting might be required. There are 4 distinct procedural stages with respect to closed meetings, and I'm going to comment on each of them, starting with notice. Section 127 of the Community Charter sets the minimum requirements for notice of council meetings. Most of them are fairly straightforward and consistently applied. Section 127(3) of the Community Charter requires a description in general terms of the meeting's purpose, and that requirement applies whether the special meeting is going to be open or closed. I think this is a really important requirement and one that in some cases has been satisfied very effectively. In some cases they've been able to read a notice of a special closed meeting and have a really clear sense of what the issue is that will be discussed, whereas in other cases there's been very little, if any, information about the matter to be discussed in the closed meeting. Obviously, you won't be providing information in the meeting notice that will undermine the reason for closing the meeting in the first place, but a general description is required, and If you can go beyond the minimum requirement, all the better. Meetings that may or must be closed to the public. This is the subject heading for Section 90 of the Community Charter. There are limited circumstances where a meeting must be closed to the public, and as the bolded may implies, in most cases, the closure of a meeting is at the discretion of council. It isn't enough to close a meeting simply because Section 90 allows it. The principle is that meetings should be open unless it's authorized, the closure is authorized and necessary. And deciding that isn't always straightforward. Okay.
Turn my back one.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you. For example, if council wanted to talk about the acquisition of property for, let's say, the construction of a new library, and wanted to have the discussion in a closed meeting, it isn't as straightforward as saying this is a land issue and consequently we can close the meeting. There's a multi-part test that has to be satisfied, or applied rather. First of all, the discussion has to be about the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements. That's relatively straightforward, although there has been some disagreement about what disposition means in this context. Second, council has to determine that that disclosure and public discussion could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and that determination is far less straightforward. It's only once those prerequisites have been satisfied that council has the choice and can decide whether to close the meeting. Now, in most cases where council decides that public discussion of a matter could be harmful to or could reasonably be expected to be harmful to the interests of the municipality, in most cases the inclination will be to close the meeting. But there may be cases where it's decided that the harm to the interests of the municipality is minimal and outweighed by the competing interest in openness and transparency. The point is that it's important that council put its mind to these considerations when exercising its discretion to decide whether or not a meeting should be closed. And the community charter provides an effective tool for resolving any uncertainty about whether a meeting should be closed. Section 91N gives you the option to close a public meeting to consider whether a subject can be discussed openly or whether a closure of the meeting is required. And although you might not use it all the time, Section 91N offers a practical way of ensuring that due consideration is given and that meetings aren't closed unnecessarily. Once a council has decided that a subject should be discussed in a closed meeting, the procedural requirements in Section 92 of the Community Charter must be followed. Section 92 states that a local government must pass a resolution in an open meeting before closing a meeting or part of a meeting. The resolution should include three things, and it often doesn't. First, it must state that a meeting or part of a meeting is to be closed. Second, it must state the basis on which the meeting is to be closed. And third, it should reference the specific paragraph of Section 90 that authorized the closure of the meeting. And what we often see is that the first component and the last component are covered, but it's fairly common for there to be very little specific information about the basis for the closure of the meeting. We'd encourage you to provide as much detail as you can about the basis for closing the meeting, again, without undermining the reason for closing the meeting in the first place. To give you a sense of what this looks like, going back to the library acquisition, or library property acquisition example, If you decided to discuss the matter in a closed meeting, it would be good practice to include the following in the resolution to close the meeting. First of all, the subject to be considered, which is the land acquisition, and second, the purpose of the land acquisition, which is to build a library. With just these few details, the public can rule out disposition and expropriation and have a relatively clear sense of what's going to be discussed at the closed meeting. So just to recap, before closing a meeting, carefully consider whether closure of the meeting is authorized and necessary. If there's uncertainty, use Section 91N to determine whether it's necessary to close the meeting. And in the resolution to close a meeting, provide as much detail as possible about the basis for closing the meeting. During the meeting, it's important to restrict discussion to subjects that were authorized by the resolution to close the meeting. If a subject comes up during the course of a closed meeting that isn't covered by the authorizing resolution, council should table the issue and discuss it at a later date, either in an open meeting or, if necessary, pass a new resolution to close the meeting for discussion on it. As I mentioned earlier, there isn't a lot of case law coming out of BC, but this is one of the topics that the courts have commented on and have cautioned against discussing matters that aren't covered by a resolution to close a meeting. The other thing I'll touch on briefly here is practice with respect to minutes. Local governments should record minutes for closed meeting in at least as much detail as minutes of open meetings. This isn't just to provide you with a reference to, but when the minutes are eventually released, it will inform the public and assure them that the meeting was properly closed to the public and that procedural requirements were met. The last thing I'll talk about is the procedure after the closure of a meeting. A lot of the subjects that require confidentiality of a closed meeting only require that confidentiality for a limited time. For example, you buy the property and you build the library, and 6 months later it's not going to harm the interests of the municipality to disclose that at one point you were discussing the acquisition of the property. It's consistent with the principles of transparency and accountability that local governments have a process in place to review information that was generated in closed meetings and release information once doing so wouldn't undermine the reason for closing the meeting. And I'm going to end on that note. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Turn it over to Kim.
Thank you, Bruce. So those are just some of the points that are covered in our guide. There are a number of other things, and in particular what I would commend to you is the fact on the last page of the guide we have produced a checklist that summarizes the best practices for local government. And there are some copies of it actually on the counter there, along with brochures about our office. So we have tried to make this as straightforward as possible for people to make use of this document. So what I'm going to do in closing and before getting to any questions that you may have is just talk about some other aspects of the office, since open meetings and similar issues aren't the only things that we're involved in with local government. I know that a number of you are familiar with the office. We deal with certainly individual complaints from members of the public. We do systemic investigations investigations. We've done them on everything from the prize payout system of the BC Lottery Corporation to, quite recently, a report on seniors' care in British Columbia. So we do some in-depth systemic investigations. And we're also engaged now in preventative ombudsmanship, and really this guide is part of that initiative. What we're trying to do is take the many years of experience and the expertise of the staff of our office and share it with various groups, so that rather than someone coming to us with a complaint that something hasn't been done properly procedurally, hopefully we can assist by avoiding things going wrong and having it not necessary to come to our office. We look at a number of administrative fairness issues, and you will see that, of course, some of these will be familiar to you. We look at adequate and useful information about the accessibility of services and programs. We look for clear service standards, reasonable opportunity for people affected by a decision or initiative to be heard. If discretion is exercised in making a decision, that it's based on objective, consistently applied criteria, and that there are adequate and appropriate reasons for decisions that are made. Local governments are not the group that we deal with most in our office. That's provincial ministries, followed by provincial commissions and provincial boards. So it's approximately 7% of the files in our office that are open that deal with local government issues, and they don't all deal with issues relating to open or closed meetings either. As you can see here, these are some of our recurring issues, and I'm sure as experienced council members, you will recognize a number of them as perhaps recurring issues for you and your staff as well. People always like to talk about bylaw enforcement, and we certainly hear about that, and also non-enforcement. Consultation processes, charges for services, usually services that people didn't think they were going to be charged for. Poor communication is something that underlies many, many complaints that come to our office, not just from local government, but from every government and public agency. It's poor communication can be the basis of many things. We've actually resolved complaints simply by listening to both sides and telling them what each other said, and both sides are convinced that's not what the other person said, and if it had been, there would have been no reason for this misunderstanding at all. Not providing service expected, and the transparency of decision-making is certainly something that's recurring to our office, which is why we spent the resources to provide and develop this guide. And I would finish by just saying, excuse me, I'm getting over one of the various colds. No, thank you. I've got some water that's going around. Transparent decision-making is something that all of us think about. We know it's essential for a healthy democracy. One of the things that certainly from our perspective is important is it enables better decision and more informed decision making on both sides of the equation, we have found, both for elected officials but also for the public. It provides them with a better understanding of why decisions are made and what is taken into consideration. And I will finish by saying that for me it's always amazing that local governments don't have the highest turnout of voters of any level of government. I know that's not usually the case, but I'm always surprised because the kind of decisions that are made and the opportunity to participate is much higher at this level. And I think the transparent decision-making encourages that opportunity and incentive to participate, and that really is important for the trust and confidence of everyone involved. So let me finish by leaving up this. If there are questions, whoops, I was leaving it up. If there are questions, this is our 1-800 number on our website. We have now, I'm firmly advised by my outreach education information officer to say we have an e-news system recently put in place to improve our communications, and that can be subscribed to. And I'd be very happy to take any questions that you may have, and I'm going to ask Bruce to come up here and back me up on some of the details. So thank you very much, and thank you very much to everyone who is participating in local government here.
Thank you, Ms. Carter. Very, very interesting. We have a couple of questions, 2 or 3 of them actually, and we'll start off with Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Ms. Carter. Thank you, sir. My question has to do with the may, quote-unquote, aspect in Section 90, and also the example that we have where it may harm the business of the municipality. I find that a very nebulous thing and a very difficult thing to deal with, because if I should elect not to vote to go in camera on something that may, and it does happen to be something that is going to harm the business of the municipality, I have made the wrong decision. And I wonder if you can expand a little bit about that.
It's actually not may harm the interests of the municipality.
Could you go to the mic?
Sorry, we're having a little trouble hearing. Sorry.
Just one point of clarification. It's actually could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, not may. So it's a bit higher standard there than simply may.
But I understand what you're talking about, which is the may close as opposed to the reassuring must close, which gives you a very clear line. And we do talk about it a little bit on page 17 of the guide, and you might want to have a look at that there. What really we are saying is that, when it's a may, it's important that the council address their minds to whether this is really something where the need and the perceived, the reasonable harm really outweighs transparency. And sometimes that does require, for example, that initial discussion under 91N to discuss whether to close and to work through those kinds of issues. I agree that there is, and as Bruce has said, in many areas, there's very little guidance in British Columbia. It's a kind of thing that, in all honesty, we would probably encourage you to pursue with someone like the Inspector of Municipalities and the Ministry of Community Development to ask for more guidance. We produced this guide, and we're certainly willing to look at other things that we can do to assist local governments. I think they would be the first port of call, so to speak, for having a feel as to what is out there with different legal decisions. I know we've looked as far afield as Ontario for some things to help provide some guidance in certain areas. But I think, the may also is a situation where probably Nanaimo and some of the larger local governments are in a better position than smaller ones, because you probably have access to some legal advice, and for really serious matters, that's certainly the route that I would go.
Okay. May I have a follow-up, Your Worship? And the final one. It was stated here tonight that the case law on in-camera stuff is not very extensive in British Columbia. Does that mean that it really isn't that big a problem, or does it mean something else?
Well, my background is as a military lawyer and a judge for about 25 years altogether. So I can tell you that the fact that something hasn't come forward may mean any number of reasons. Everything from the cost of litigation through to people not really being aware of what they can do. What I would say is I think that the local government issues that go forward tend to be ones that involve lots of money as opposed to anything else, because that way people can afford the investment. The one case, and I think, do we mention it in the guide, Bruce, the one about not going off topic?
Yes, we do.
Okay.
We don't make reference to the specific case, but we talk about what the court said in that case.
And so if you want, we'll send you a connection to that. That's really the kind of the clearest statement, and it touches on a number of issues, but it's hard. It's really saying, if you go in camera to talk about item X, don't throw item Y in just because it seems efficient. You're going to have to do that separately. But what I would say is we'd be happy to send up to Council that reference.
Thank you very much.
You know, if I might ask a quick question, and there's two other speakers behind. Normally, what we do is look at what we refer to as the 3 Ls, litigation, labor, and land, as our primary reasons, but not exclusively, for going in camera. Is there an actual simple criteria formula that is available, or is obviously no two cases are often the same, and it's hard to apply the same rule in every situation, but I just wondered if there is an approximate decision process at which point you could, we as a council could decide when to and when not to.
Well, again, I think we go into some detail in the guide, and I'd reference that, but what I would say is there is the requirement. If it's a must, that's fine. When it's a may, you have to do that balancing that Bruce has talked about. It's not just because it's land. There has to be that risk of harm to the interests of the local government in doing something openly. So it's really kind of more than a one-step test. And one of the things that we do mention is, for example, litigation. Almost anything, as you know, and most of us know, it can be subject to litigation. So it's more than just a mere thought that there might be litigation somewhere down the line. We make the point that either a specific threat of litigation or advice from legal counsel that indicates there's a real likelihood would be one of the things under that L heading to take into account.
Okay, I might just point out, but it's my understanding, and council may have a different view, that traditionally we wouldn't get into litigation unless it was imminent or we had legal advice that it was going to. I'm not aware of a scenario, and maybe staff has a comment on it, where we have, on the remote chance of potential litigation, made a decision to go in camera. I don't believe, I'm not aware of that. If it's happened, I can't recall it. I think sorry, I was going to say, I think it normally is something that we would do as a resort when it was imminent or about to happen, or where our lawyer had recommended it.
And in that case, you'll find that that's really what our best practice is. It may not be every local government that has that same restricted approach.
Okay. We have Councillor Beswick, Councillor McKay, and Councillor Kipp. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Ms. Carter and Bruce, for attending tonight. I just have one question as it relates to the release of in-camera information. And on page 21 of your best practices guide, you have 2 bullet points. One indicates that releasing as much information as possible, as often as possible, once confidentiality is no longer required. Now, is it then your recommendation that we have a policy established by council in which previous in-camera agenda items be reviewed and released in a timely fashion, that we actually have that in a policy?
What the recommendation is that there be a practice to have the closed meetings and the minutes regularly reviewed. In a lot of cases, it's a member of staff, the chief administrative officer or someone similar, who's tasked with going through it to establish that the time is right. Inherently having a policy certainly helps the staff who are tasked to do this, with doing it with a degree of confidence that they're following a process that council is satisfied with. So I think I would say that a policy would be a good thing. Like everyone, we all struggle with the past, but going forward would be the way at least I would start with, saying, looking at going forward, having a policy and then applying that policy. And I think, Bruce, we recommend that probably it be done on a regular basis so that, it's not something that is kind of intermittent, that, every so often, every 3 months or something, someone looks back. And it may well be that at one point in time, confidentiality is still required. So it's reviewed, it's looked at, and you say, no, can't release it yet. But it comes up again, and at a later time, it may be appropriate. Do you have anything to add, Bruce?
Thank you, and to follow up, Your Worship. And then is it also reasonable to assume that, inclusive of the minutes upon release, when it's no longer determined to be of a confidential matter, that the vote on the matter would also be released?
I think that would be part of the minutes, so yes.
Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's hard to believe that the Ombudsperson's offices, that's a tumble, has only been in existence for 33 years. In British Columbia. Bruce made mention of the videotaping we do of our council meetings. It's also televised and then rebroadcast a number of times over the course of the week. We're also, for the past year or so, been taping our Committee of the Whole meetings. They're not for television, but they are available to the public. Can you tell me how many other communities that you're aware of that do such a thing?
I can't give you an exact number. I know that there are a number of local governments who do televise or tape and then make available proceedings. And I know Bruce has talked to some in the course of preparing the guide, but I don't think you have an exact number, Bruce.
I don't, and often I'm looking at these things on an as-need-to basis, and what I can say is just among the few that I have noted, the Nanaimos is a really good one, particularly the indexing. It was really easy to find just what I was looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you very much. Thank you both. Excellent information helps us guide our work. I've attended some of your workshops before, and I think they're excellent at UBCM and places. A couple different questions. How much time in advance do we require really to give notice for an in-camera meeting, giving us time to act and that?
There's a minimum.
24 hours is what's required unless there's a unanimous vote to waive that requirement. But I, other than what is legally required, 24 hours, I think that it's up to council's discretion. I don't think that there's any guidelines beyond that minimum 24-hour requirement.
Okay, thank you very much. And the depth of in-camera notes and minutes, I notice in some of your things, say page 9 or page 20, it talks about the notes should be almost the same as regular minutes.
Yes. And
as much information as regular, or at least as much as a regular documentation.
And really, from our perspective, the reason for that is it's a contribution to transparency. If you had two standards of note-taking, one for open meetings and one for closed meetings, then it really does contribute to people thinking that even when the closed meetings minutes are made open, that there's still stuff that's being missed. There may be, for example, even when you make the minutes available, there may be things that still have to be redacted. For example, personal information. There's a whole list of things that you cannot share. And so it's something that if you do them in the same depth, then I think it puts you in a position to be able to say to people confidently, you have everything that we can give you. And that's really the rationale behind that.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Is there then a requirement at an in-camera meeting to make the motion to rise and report in order for that information to go forward?
Go forward to be made public? I'm not aware of that, but Bruce, are you?
I'm not sure either, I'm sorry.
But what I would say is that there is a best practice, which is to make the minutes available once the reason for them not needing to be in camera and confidential. The actual process, if there's something that's required in the meeting and a statement, that's not something that we're aware of. But if you feel you should do it, two things. One is I can't see any harm in doing it. And the second one is you may wish to check with your legal counsel as to whether that's a procedural matter that you need to deal with at the meeting in order to allow this to happen afterwards.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see, Councillor Kipp.
That triggered a question. Page 20 of the booklet says, after a closed meeting, following the conclusion of a closed meeting, careful consideration should be given to release the minutes and other records that may have been generated during the closed meeting for the openness and transparency. We could, in fact, now move in this open meeting to go in camera. We could go behind closed doors, let everybody wait, and then come back out and go back in. That has been done. So we wouldn't have to give notice other than we thought by a motion of council we could go in camera then. But then when we come out, I think, further on Councillor Johnson's question, we should consider almost all times to rise and report, or should we not?
Well, I mean, what I would say is it seems consistent with transparency to look at as soon as possible what can be shared. But really what we're saying here is that process, ultimately it's when the confidentiality is no longer required. And so that may be actually at different times for different information in the meeting. And, if you want, our general rule would be the sooner the better, as long as you're comfortable that, the requirements of confidentiality have been observed as long as necessary.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think an example might be where we're involved with the purchase of land and where the completion date could be months in advance. Obviously, it would be a challenge to release before any documentation is completed and expose ourselves to someone who might want to make a contrary bid that's higher than ours and through public information. So I don't know that there is such a thing as a fixed formula that we could use on when to release it. But I think I'm right in saying that we do try to get this information out in a timely fashion. And I think I might just mention that Mr. Holmes is the person that we look to for direction, and of course our city manager, Mr. Kenning. And normally, but not always, but normally the formula we follow is direction from staff whether or not they, in their professional opinion, feel that this matter should and does qualify for going in camera. It is occasionally the situation where our council might request it, but I would say in almost every instance it would be where our staff has considered this at length. In some cases maybe looked at situations similar to this in previous times and come back with a determination that they feel it is fair. So I guess the point is we do not only look to ourselves for a decision on that, but also try to involve senior staff in that decision process as well.
And I think that the idea of seeking professional input is an excellent one. Ultimately, though, the decision does belong to the council.
We appreciate that. Thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. I might just add that we've always had outstanding service from your office in Victoria, and I would want to thank you for taking the time to come, both of you, and as well point out to the public, anyone that's watching at home or in the audience here, you are approachable, very approachable, and the fact that you were a military officer and a judge shouldn't intimidate them in any way. And I think that the point being that if people have questions on procedures and that, I encourage them to contact you in your office, and I'm sure you'll give them the necessary information at all times. Sorry, was it something I said, or is that? Oh.
No, it isn't. So thank you very much. And we have brochures there as well.
Good heavens. You need more water with that? Anyway, thank you again, both. Very much appreciated.
It's a really dry something.
Okay, the next presentation is Mr. Tom Hickey, General Manager of Community Services, and Ms. Susan Clift, the Director of Engineering and Public Works, to provide a presentation regarding the city's asset management plan. Mr. Hickey?
Council, before you is the asset management update. It's really the start of discussion. What we hope to do is get questions from you as we move through the presentation. Tomorrow we'll circulate the master plan or asset management plan update to you, as well as post it on the website. Once you've had a chance to review that, over the next couple of months we can take time to have further discussion, dialogue, and get your input. So just going back, in 2010, we did an asset management plan for engineering and public works. It provided information about the principles and process, the need for asset management, construction history, and it also dealt with projected replacement needs and identified funding gaps. And in 2011, the U.S. Council worked through some service level statements, and we'll be showing you these through the presentation as well. This is the mission statement from the strategic plan that Council adopted this last year. It is really focused on delivery of services, and delivery of services really includes the use of infrastructure and assets. In that strategic plan, Council had one of its 6 priorities, asset management, and that's what we're working through as a start to this evening. This asset management update for 2012 builds on that 2010 plan and includes facilities, parks, and information technology. This update focuses on long-term renewal plans for assets, and also will be presenting to you recommendations for funding these plans. So what is asset management expected to help? You'll see there, for the citizens by sustaining value for the services provided, for council in making service level and investment decisions, and for staff with the management of the assets. This update and the 2010 plan really only deals with renewal and replacement of current assets based on current service levels. This plan does not include new assets for growth, upgrade, or strategic investment. So we're really dealing with what we have and their replacement. You've seen this before as well, key elements of asset management. These elements were introduced in the 2010 plan. And I would like to say that we use this again as the structure to do this update. This plan was developed in-house with a multi-department steering committee that guided the process to ensure a coordinated effort. The city also participated in Asset Management BC, and actually Wally Wells is here, and he is part of, leads that initiative. And we attended training sessions through Asset Management BC that included a number of our peer communities, so we could use information on what they're doing and share ideas on what we're doing. So we found it very helpful in moving forward with our plan. Now into some of the information. So this slide just gives you a good general indicator of the replacement value for each asset. If you'll recall, in 2010, we valued engineering and public works assets at about $1.6 billion. Earlier this year, we did an estimate. We thought, in the strategic planning process, we'd be about $1.9 billion, but really our asset value now is about $2.2 billion. And it's just really a general indicator of what the value of our assets are. And you'll see, of course, to the left, water utility is around $700 million. Sewer, drainage, and transportation are around $400 million. Facilities, which is new online, is around $245 million. And we've got parks, amenities, IT, and fleet, all in the tens of millions of dollars. This is another good general indicator. The yellow bar is expected asset life, and you could debate, and we will have dialogue on what expected asset life is. And the other bar, the darker bar, is the average age in years of our assets. So for example, water utility at the top, generally the expected life of that asset in years is 80 years. Right now, we think our assets on average are about 30 years. So we really have a relatively young average age for that asset class. And as you work through all those different categories for assets, you'll see by and large the city has a relatively young on average asset infrastructure class, or on average, the infrastructure is relatively young. Mm-hmm. The two examples that are showing more age are parks amenities and recreational dams. I'm going to go to another general attention directing tool. So that shows the $2.2 billion value in assets, all lumped together in one bar. The green portion, which is about $2 billion, is what is in good and very good condition, meaning that it's at the mid-stage of its expected life or has relatively or recently been rehabbed or improved. So the bulk of the city's assets, the current condition is good or very good. We have a band of about $72 million worth of assets that's in fair condition. That's approaching the end of its asset value, but still has some useful life. And then we go into poor and very poor. That is about $86 million worth of the city's assets. Those are approaching end of life or are needing to be replaced or rehabbed. So you'll see that red portion should link up more directly to the 5-year financial plan, the capital plan, and in time that should be totally in sync, but that's generally where you'll see things that are needing to be replaced in the next few years. Any questions on any of that?
Yeah, Your Worship.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you. When it comes to poor and very poor, is there a correlation or a connection to that in your previous slide where I noticed that recreational dams and facilities are getting closer to the end of their...
There would be some correlation there, yes.
Okay. Other than those two, what else would be included in that? In the poor section?
In the poor section, we do know in facilities that we've got the Nanaimo Center stage, we've got Departure Bay Activity Center. In some of the utilities, we of course have some water system utility that is aging. A lot of those utilities are of various age, but generally we'll go through that in each asset class through the next part of the presentation.
Sorry, I'd like to add a little more. Councillor Patchy, Your Worship, of the 86 million, 30 million of that is water infrastructure, so it's a fair amount of it. 18 is sewer, 13 is transportation, 11 is the recreational dams, 6 for drainage, 2 for facilities, and 2 for fleet. So it isn't dominated by the recreational dams by any means. And when we get to each of the, we have one of these bar graphs for every infrastructure category, so we can go into the details under each category. Thanks.
If I can, Mr. Key, and I don't know through you or through Mr. Kenning, but are we not reserving 1% of the tax increase for next year for infrastructure replacement?
That's what we're recommending as part of the financial plan.
Yes, a recommendation only, of course. Yeah. Councillor Kipp.
Leads right into my question. When I see fair and poor on this slide, and it's 72 million and 86, and we're putting 1% aside per year, and the 1% adds up to 1.2 million now? 1 million now?
About that, yes.
So we're putting $1 million aside a year over the next 5-year plan.
No, that's not entirely correct. What we're recommending is 1% additional each year. So in year 5, you're putting 5% aside. And we'll show you how that ties into these numbers later on.
Perfect.
Okay, carry on. Is that the end of your presentation?
No.
Well, carry on then.
Got a little bit left still.
I have no further questions here.
Water infrastructure, so that's the service level statement for water that Council adopted in 2011. And we'll get into water infrastructure current condition. So you'll see there, that's again, that one bar graph, but specific to water itself. And Susan was able to tell you some of the components that were in poor and very poor for water infrastructure. This is what we've been working on now is 20-year replacement plans for each asset class, as well as 80-year replacement plans. So in this graph, I'd just like to show you or highlight a couple of points. So what we've done is, based on age, material, break history, condition assessment for the assets, we've developed a 20-year replacement plan. So that blue bar shows you the value of replacement that we're expecting over the next 20 years for water infrastructure. The red line is the 2012 to 2016 current funding. So that's the funding in the current plan. The blue line above that, you can see that just at about the $6 million mark, is the average required renewal over that 20-year replacement plan. And the line above that, coming up to the $10 million mark, that is the amount of funding required to keep that asset renewed over the 80-year time period. So we have a funding gap in the 20-year plan of about $2 million and a funding gap for the 80-year life cycle of $4.4 million. That's the difference between what we're currently putting in our 5-year financial plan and what we'd be looking at for 20 years or long term. Is that, any questions on that?
Not at this point? No, at this point. Councilor Bestwick.
I'm going to take you...
Sorry, Tom.
We
Sorry.
have one question.
No. Thank you. If you just go back to that last slide, please. Thanks. So when we speak to long-term replacement plan and the average required, over 20 years, the funding shortfall or gap is $2 million, but over the life cycle of, did you say 80 years it's 4.4?
Yes, that's correct.
So our model and or formula for asset contributions will clearly get better after in somewhere between 10 and 20 years from now?
If we are contributing 1% more per year for the next 5 years, that will cover off the $2 million, in water, we're actually looking at a percentage increase per year in the water rates, but that would cover off some of that gap for sure in the short term. In the long term, there's a $4.4 million gap, and that is the intent now, is to collect dollars for future asset replacement.
And just one other question, Your Worship. That replacement would include such things when we have the new water treatment plant as the new membrane that has a life cycle of, so it's included in here, those types of replacements?
That's correct.
Is it a 5-year replacement cycle for the membrane?
Oh, the membrane replacement is about a 12-year cycle, and I've just been poked in the arm to say that that's actually in the treatment plant's operating budget. So the replacement of the membranes is in the operating budget for the treatment plant.
So it's not included in this?
Not included in this, no.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Gibb.
Just a clarification, that funding gap, the 20 years, $2 million per year,
Yes.
and a life cycle is 4.4 per year
Yes.
for 20 years.
For the 80 years.
80 years, sorry.
Yes. Okay, and I'll just go to the next slide to show you how that works. So that is the replacement plan for 80 years. And you'll see there the first 20 years takes us up to about 2031. Then we've got spikes to upgrade South Fork Dam and farther along the way jump, Lake Dam, and a lot of the supply lines or some of the other spikes. But that essentially is a replacement plan for 80 years. So that's why you'll see that the longer-term replacement is a higher requirement of funding than the 20-year plan.
Okay, I see no further questions at this point.
Explain it, please.
Sanitary sewer infrastructure, that's the service level statement. That was adopted 2011. Again, current condition, so you'll see in sewer we have $18 million in the poor and very poor category, but a good portion of the $400 million in value is in the good and very good section, and we've got good reliability in the sewer system right now, and it's functioning reasonably well. Going along to the 20-year replacement plan for sewer, you see that our the red line is our current funding. The blue line, again, is the average required for 20 years. That gap is about $500,000 a year, so we're reasonably close there over 20 years in funding for replacing sewer assets. But the long-term funding gap is shy of about $3.6 million per year. And I'm going to take you to the next slide. And you'll see why that is the case. When you look over 80 years, you'll see once we get out to about 2053, a lot of the sewer infrastructure needs replacement, and that is going to be costly in the long term. So that's what pushes that the renewal costs for the life cycle up as high as it is, and that's why we have that $3.6 million gap long term. Any questions on that one?
I don't see any at this point. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to the general taxation funded assets: drainage, transportation, parks, amenities, facilities, information technology, and fleet. Going to drainage, again, that's the service level statement. Drainage. Right now, our drainage system is relatively of young age. There's been a lot of investment by council since the early 90s through to now. Our drainage system has really improved in the community and is quite effective and has a value of about $400 million. You'll see that in the short term that our funding needs only have a gap of $100,000 per year over 20 years. However, in the long term, that gap is substantially more, $4.1 million per year. Oh, and I don't have a long-term slide on that. We'll show you a compilation of all our general revenue funded assets. But why that is the case is we have an asset in drainage that's relatively young in average age, and so we have big replacement dollars down the road, much like you've seen in sewer, where we'd have to invest lots of money 30 to 50 years out.
If I can, Tom, just one question you had on that. A lot of the graphs we were looking at previously had 50 and 80 years. This one's much shorter. Is there a reason drainage has a shorter term than?
We actually have all the general taxation funded assets pooled together for an 80-year graph to show you the general taxation needs in about 6 or 8 slides, so that will hopefully help out. But in this case, the funding gap is really because there's a lot of replacement needed many years out versus we're in pretty good shape in the next 20 years.
Okay, thank you.
Transportation, that's the infrastructure or the service level statement for transportation. Transportation has got a lot of different components that have different useful lives that range from bridges to roads to street lights and even sidewalks. But in a general condition assessment, you'll see that, again, good to very good in roads. Lots of it is in very good shape. You'll probably recall that in 2010 we noted to you that our roads are in very good shape as compared to most communities across Canada. However, you will know that the road condition is probably declining somewhat in the last couple of years as our dollars of investment from about 1995 to today in 2010 haven't really changed, yet the price of oil has gone up quite a bit. So we are ending up in a situation where we're not really rehabbing as much road today for the same amount of funding as we were able to in the early to mid-90s. Anyways, generally the assets for transportation are in overall good to very good condition for the most part. And we're showing you here that 20-year renewal plan. You'll see there we have a funding gap in the 20-year plan of $2.3 million. You'll see towards the end, 2028, and in that area that we're starting to get much more need for road rehab and sidewalk replacement and that type of infrastructure replacement. And that builds as the years move out from 2028 along the 80-year plan. Parks amenities. This is new this year. That includes destination neighborhood parks, sports fields, playgrounds, trails, and we've included dams in parks because the dams related to water supply are in the water infrastructure. We have 6 other dams that are really in park areas, so we've pulled them into the parks amenities. And parks amenities, the current condition shows that we do have a lot of assets there in poor or very poor condition, nearing the end of their life, some in fair and about 50% in the good and very good category. There's the long-term replacement plan for parks, and you'll see there that in 2013, there's a $7 million number. That is a number currently that we have set aside for the two Colliery dams, and Council will be looking at information there on removal, which is that $7 million, or rehab or replacement. So that's signifies the funding for that. Moving on to facilities. So overall, we have 176 buildings. We took a look at more of the major buildings, or the bigger ones, about 80 of those. And the facilities, each component of facilities has many useful different lengths. So it is one that's hard to make general summary information because a roof in one for a building lasts a lot different time than a foundation, or a different time than an HVAC component. So what we have done here is used what is currently industry standard, is where you take the replacement value of the facility and you divide that by what we're doing in the next 5 years in that facility to replace components. And so, for example, in the poor and very poor category, which is $2 million, those two facilities are Departure Bay Activity Center and Nanaimo Center Stage. And for Nanaimo Center Stage, for example, for us, we would have to do about $800,000 to do the work on the exterior of the building. And that building has a replacement value not much more than that, so we would end up with a poor to very poor rating because we're having to put a lot of dollars into renewal based on the overall value of the building. Does everyone have a sense of what that? So just moving along to the long-term replacement plan for facilities. You'll see there that we have a funding gap on the 20-year plan of about $2 million, and for a life cycle of about the same. And that's because a lot of the components get replaced just many times along the whole 80-year plan. So there's not much change between what you see in 20 years and over 80 years. Two big spikes you'll see there, one in 2018. That, a large component of that is the Departure Bay Activity Center. That will be requiring council discussion on what you want to do with that facility because it has some structural problems, roofing problems, foundation problems, and that's one that we really have to think about replacing, removing. What do we want to do? How much do we want to invest? And then a little bit later in 2021, that bigger spike there is the public works buildings replacement. What do we do? How do we work to renew those? So those are a couple of big questions to be considered long term. Mayor Rattan?
Yeah, we have a question. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Two questions. On a previous slide, you indicated for 2013, $7 million for parks, which was the dams.
Yes.
Is there anything allocated for Swilana?
Only renewal for playgrounds and sports fields.
Just renewal for playgrounds and sports fields right now. Yeah.
Thank you. And I notice in the facility long-term replacement plan, which takes us a significant amount of years to 2031, there's nothing in here that would resemble facility replacement for an arena, sports and entertainment center. So we're of the opinion then that we'll get to 2031 with our population expanding to approximately, I'm guessing, 130,000 people. Is there any consideration in here in another slide to come or forecasting for facilities?
You'll see in the plan that you'll be getting a copy of tomorrow, we've listed a number of considerations that will need to be before council over the next 10 years related to growth and also community growth, upgrade facilities. So those are more considerations in that area. This here is really just a replacement and renewal plan for existing facilities. So for our arenas, these are component improvements. I think, Councillor Bestwick, what you're looking at is what do we do for longer-term strategic investment, growth, and upgrade? And we haven't dealt with that here.
Thank you. And then if that said, is it reasonable to assume that the RCMP building upgrade is on this slide or another?
No, it's again an upgrade, so it would be an addition to an asset. So it would be an extension or an addition to an asset. So that is again something that needs further consideration by council and is not part of a replacement.
Thank you. And not to belabor this, Your Worship, but so the 2021 Public Works upgrade is not considered an asset improvement. It's considered to be something. How do they differ?
Good point. This one would be similar floor area. The reason is we've got trailers there right now, so I guess we could choose to replace with trailers. This here is a replacement with a structure, so that's why there's significantly more dollars there.
So it's classified as something different?
Yeah, a replacement, yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Mr. Hickey, if we go to 2018 on this slide, you mentioned that the main cost for that is the Departure Bay Activity Center.
Yes.
Which later on the agenda of tonight is a building that is among the three worst as far as seismic conditions are concerned. So why would we wait so long?
And that council could choose to accelerate that, but that is something that needs consideration in the shorter term, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further questions at this point.
So that was a good point Councillor Patchy just brought up, is the seismic screening is now completed, so that's something that we've got to get more information on the costing for the second stage screening of the buildings now that have come in with a higher need for seismic improvement, and also renovations to older buildings. Information technology equipment. includes computer hardware and communication equipment, and that is a service level statement that the IT department has prepared for this presentation. And the long-term replacement plan for IT, again, shows $100,000 per year shortfall or funding gap between what we currently fund for IT replacement and what we're expecting to be needing to replace over the next 20 years. And that is the same as the 80-year life cycle, because information technology equipment tends to have a shorter lifespan, for the most part less than 20 years, so you'd see that just rotating through on the same, with be it 20 years or an 80-year replacement plan. Fleet. This includes vehicles, heavy equipment, fire apparatus. Generally, most of it is in good or very good condition, about $2 million in poor or very poor. Council has been good at allowing the city to maintain a fleet reserve. We have been working to drop the average age of the fleet down. But we do have about a $200,000 per year shortfall in our investment in the fleet. That really is recouped by the fleet charge-out rates that each department pays, but that does have impact on taxation in the law, as a byproduct of charging that fleet rate. That essentially costs each operating department money. Now, this is the last slide, and then I'll have Brian Clemens come up to summarize the financial plan recommendations. But here we have the general infrastructure life cycle plan for 80 years. So this is transportation, drainage, parks, amenities, and facilities all lumped into one. And you'll see there that our current overall general taxation investment is in the neighborhood of $6 million or $7 million. Our overall 20-year funding gap is about $5 million. That's the blue line just above $10 million there. And our life cycle, 80-year funding gap is $11 million. That's the black line, just above $15 million there. So that shows you again that out longer term we have a lot of replacement to be done, but in the shorter term we're in reasonably good condition. And I'll get Brian.
He's off in your left there.
You want to sit in one of these?
Sure.
Thanks, Tom. So what we've talked about so far is the asset inventory, what we have, what its life cycle is, what schedule needs to be replaced. So obviously the next thing we need to talk about is how we're going to get the funding to do that. So it's quite a complicated procedure, and I think one of the things to think about right off the top is that we're not going to fund that entire gap by raising taxes or user fees. There is more than one source of funds in order to close the gap. So we have these plans that we prepared for assets, and they'll be funded through increases in general taxation, sewer fees, and water. We've looked at, and one of the things you've noticed when we showed you the 80-year graphs, the life cycle graphs, is that some of this problem isn't right upon us. We've got some time to resolve the problem, and one of the ways to do that is by phasing in some increases. So in addition to the property taxation or user fees for water and sewer, we also have included an assumption that we will receive some grants from senior governments. And one of the things we're going to need to do over the next few years is monitor this to make sure that our assumptions are accurate. We have had some very large infrastructure grants in the past. We can hope we continue to be lucky enough to receive them. We're also not starting from zero. We have some reserves set aside, and as we collect more money, one of the things that we'll do is we'll take the interest earned on all of these reserves and turn them back into future infrastructure, so we'll save the money into the reserve funds. And the fourth source of funding is that one of the things that will happen over the life cycle of the plan is as we retire debt, as we stop paying debt payments, for example, on the Aquatic Center or on this building, for example, we'll use that money to put into our infrastructure reserves. So that's one way to continue to increase the reserves for infrastructure without actually increasing taxes over the course of the years. And of course, this isn't. This is the first year that we've done this. So what we've done is we've created a plan that we put into the 2013 budget, which you've seen before because we talked about it at the budget time. So that we have included in our draft budget an additional 2.5% increase in water rates each year for 8 years. We've included a 5% increase in sewer rates each year for the next 5 years, and then 4 years for the following 5 years, and a 1% tax increase for the next 5 years. So each year of the next 5 years to fund the general. So one of the points that I want to make at this point is that we're going to review this every year to make sure that these are the right numbers, and I would expect that you're going to see these numbers change over time. And I couldn't tell you right now whether that means that there'll be longer increases or shorter increases, but we know that we will continue to review the numbers and amend them every year. So there's bylaws on tonight's agenda that use the first years of these increases. So one of the things I want to show you, you've seen a lot of graphs tonight, and this is a relatively simple graph, but the blue line, which is the line on top, I wish we used a different color now, shows what it shows is that over time, that's the balance of the reserves in the water fund. So it shows as we put aside additional money earlier on, those reserves start to increase. And the reason that they need to be higher than that line that's around $9 million, that line is the long-term funding requirement for water. So the reason we need more money is that just on the other side of this graph is, you might remember in Tom's graphs, there were a number of big years, peak years. So we have to build reserves up, and then we'll spend them, and then we'll continue to build them up again. You'll get a slightly different pattern depending on the fund. So at some years we'll be collecting less money than we need for the current year, but over time it'll all work out. And at some point those reserves will build up to the point where we'll be able to reverse the tax increases. But right now I couldn't tell you exactly what point that is. I'd be lying if I said we could project it that accurately, but it's probably some time off in the future. But the intention of this is to start collecting money now, put them in reserves, use those reserves to earn interest, and put aside other contributions to those reserves. And that will help us fund the infrastructure problem that's coming to us in the future. And I think that's it for my slides. So
one last slide. Just one last slide on next steps. So again, tonight just starts the dialogue. What we're helping to do is have more discussion with you and get input over the next couple of months as you're working through the budget. What we'd like help with is on the development of an asset management policy. That's something we committed to as part of the strategic plan. Also, in the next year or two or three, Council can look at and review service levels. Do we want the level of road quality we provide now? You could choose to reduce that level of road quality and save you dollars for replacement and rehab. So those are all considerations in all areas. The other thing is, as staff, we're going to continue to work on our information and planning to continue to improve the information we have going out for the future. And also, what we'd like to do is, instead of just having this be an asset management plan for renewal, also start to build in upgrades and growth, and that way you could see the full picture. Thank you.
Good. We've got a couple of questions. One I had, just going to ask one, and I think Councillor McKay has a question too, but Mr. Clements earlier was referring to, well, it's okay, I just going to say that, all right. When you talk about putting money into an investment account of some type, one of the problems is if you're paying a mortgage, the rates are wonderful. If you're trying to earn a living on it, there's very little in there. What kind of a return are we getting, with 2 to 3% in that range?
We'd be doing well to get into that range. We're probably around 2% right now.
So the growth in that really is Well, it's important, but not really.
If you got $100 million, it all adds
Yeah,
up.
sure. That's fair enough, too. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. There was one item there that was not included in the areas in which we can raise revenues, and that is the increases in density that we can handle within the community. We're seeing lots of densification applications in front of us on an ongoing basis, and I know we've got lots of pockets and lots of areas in the community that we can handle more density without increasing capital costs for new infrastructure. And I think we continue to overlook the importance of that increasing densification throughout the community without having to add new assets.
Mayor Matan, that's a good point that Councillor McKay makes. The more density you can have in areas, the better efficiency you get from your infrastructures and the less miles of piping you need for all types of utilities. So, good point.
I just want to add, though, that the new infrastructure is funded from different sources. It's not part of this. It's either funded from things like development cost charges primarily or developers' contributions. This relates to just replacement of inventory we already have, and I agree with Mr. Hickey that the more dense you're populated, the better off we are in terms of replacement.
Supplemental. What I'm thinking about is lots of little corners and little areas in the community where people are discovering little places where they can take a piece of property that earns us currently perhaps $1,500 or $2,000 in annual tax revenue. By subdividing the lot and being creative, they can now turn that into a $7,000 or $8,000 or $9,000 annual revenue on the same piece of property, and much more efficient use of the land within the community without increasing infrastructure costs.
Okay.
Well, Your Worship, it does increase infrastructure costs because you're using more water and more sewer and those things, but those are funded through development cost charges, not through this asset management plan.
Okay, I think that, Ms. Hickey, is that your presentation then? I just want to thank you, I think, and to Ms. Clift as well. I think it was very informative. A little long, but I mean, it's a difficult subject to get through, and there's no easy way around it. And I think it was done in a very informative manner, and I want to thank you both for it. Thank you. So we'll move along, and the next, we have a delegation now. Mr. Wally Wells, the Executive Director of Asset Management BC, and I might point out that in addition, Mr. Wells is also a professional engineer, and he's the former president of the Greater Nanaimo Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Wells, welcome, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor, and members of Council. I don't usually use notes, but this is such a complex subject and I have such limited time, I want to make sure I stick to the key points. My name is Wally Wells. Tonight I'm here as the Executive Director of Asset Management BC. Asset Management BC is a network. We have thousands of people involved now. The working group is composed of 11 associations representing mostly municipal employees and all of the administrative, political through UBCM, finance, technical, and any other function necessary to carry out integrated asset management. We're linked provincially with other groups nationally. We're in touch regularly with Infrastructure Canada, of course, other organizations in the United States, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia. One of the points I wanted to make tonight is this is a problem for all of Canada. This is not unique to Nanaimo, and I think this council should be complimented on being a leader in what you're doing. We have 4,000 municipalities in Canada, and there's 4,000 problems out there. And some of them, for instance, even on the accounting side, which was to have been concluded in 2010, the province of New Brunswick has asked for extension to 2014. So we in BC are well ahead of the equation. Asset Management BC has been fortunate enough in using our World Network to bring world-class training predominantly from Australia here to British Columbia. We have had approximately 15 communities participate in that, and 2 island communities, one of those being Nanaimo. And a number of your staff, both the technical side and the financial staff, have participated in that training. We brought that training in because of the very, very complex issues, as you can see, that exist here. And how do we bring all of this information together? The kind of presentation you have tonight, my numbers may not be correct, but I think they're very close. We are only the 3rd community on the island to have a presentation as comprehensive as this on where we're at with our infrastructure. So again, I think it's strongly commend and compliment not only the work of staff, which is ongoing, but of council of taking the lead in this, and I hope you see, as we do, there's a lot of work to be done ahead. Staff have quite correctly presented this as an update, and it will always be called an update because this never ends. Tomorrow, as your staff is out there fixing hydrants, doing potholes, cutting grass in parks, fixing roofs, changes the asset inventory. As you build new things or delete things, as you will in part of the water system, changes the asset inventory. Our numbers change as the economy changes. I know in the height of the construction season 4 or 5 years ago, I believe the total assets in Calgary were some $43 billion. At the end of the recession, it had dropped to $39 billion in replacement costs. So we know that these numbers are going to vary, but we have to be comfortable with where they're at. However, as much as I compliment you on it, it's due to changes in accounting procedures for all of our communities in Canada that we actually were forced through the accounting profession into putting on the balance sheet the value of our assets. It drove us, fortunately, to getting inventories of all of our assets and also doing some of the work on condition assessment. And that's really where it's brought us today, to take that information, balance it for you, take the historical value that the accountants ask for, move it forward to the replacement value, as you've heard tonight, and deal with the inventory. We're talking about the core of our community here and the fundamentals to the economic base. So I would suggest to you that this is probably one of the most important reports and dialogue that you will get for some period of time. There's a few things that should be noted in this, though, and some of this related to some of the questions asked of staff in doing it. This is dealing only with your existing infrastructure. It really is what you have now in relation to what it would take to maintain and replace that infrastructure. And before I forget, when I use the word maintain, please do not slash your maintenance budget. It's like your automobile. The more you maintain it, the longer it'll last. So the more we can put into maintaining our assets, the longer it is, and the longer out these numbers get spread. And that's one message we're carrying to all of the communities across, not only in BC, but in Canada. The report you have tonight also deals only with the assets under your jurisdiction. As a taxpayer, both for you and for me, I pay more than that. We have, through the regional district, the main services of solid waste management, transit, and sewage treatment. Those also eventually have to be brought in and looked at in the taxpayer. And a report I received very recently that says we basically are underestimating where we're at also reminds us that we have schools, hospitals, telecommunication systems. The Canadian Electrical Association suggests that the replacement of the electrical grid over time is some $300 billion to sustain electricity for our communities. So all of this is needed to sustain our city and our communities, and there's only a limited pot. So while we speak of grants, and we do know that the Infrastructure Canada program is under review right now for extension beyond 2014, all of us are going to be under huge pressure for an increasing requirement for money and a decreasing pot. So it's very, very important that we deal with these numbers. This is only the start, but I think the important thing, and the really, really important thing that I think we're very lucky here in Nanaimo, is this is not an immediate crisis. The numbers tonight that I have seen and you have seen, I'm very delighted to see. We will have deficiencies, of course, but there is no immediate crisis out there at the moment. It only becomes a crisis if we don't do something about it, and I know that you will. So part of the purpose of doing this, and some of those bars that you saw in Mr. Hickey's graph going further out that extended beyond the funding, is to level out that funding and plan for the funding now so that we don't end up with surprises and huge pots of money requirement on down the way. You've identified $2.2 billion in assets ultimately requiring renewal. The easy arithmetic would say if 70 years is the renewal, then throw $30 million a year at it and we can replace it. I wish it was that simple. Firstly, $30 million isn't available. And secondly, it isn't that simple. It's very complex, and you'll be getting an awful lot more information from staff as it comes through, because your asset base, your costs, your condition assessment, and information will change. But what becomes a good news story in some of the assets may become a bad news story on others. So while we may only have 30% confidence in the information going out 30 or 40 or 50 years right now, I had to change my head as an engineer and say it's okay to tell you that, because it's important that we plan that longer term. Currently, you've got spending about $5.1 million on water and sewer, which is rate-based, with a need of about 10. On your assets that are not including water and sewer. What you end up with on the total assets that were presented tonight is moving from an annual expenditure of about $10.5 million to $17.9 million. You have recommendations in front of you with respect to potential tax bases, increase in water and sewer rates. The program is giving you your initial financial plan and for each of the individual asset categories. There is a fairly formal definition being put through the Government Financial Officers Association to long-term financial plans, and a lot of training going on in the finance community for that right now. We are recommending to our communities through Asset Management BC, and as Asset Management BC and as a taxpayer in Nanaimo, I would recommend that you direct staff to undertake the long-term financial plan and have that available to you prior to the election coming in 2014. One of the other recommendations that staff have made is looking at service levels. I think you need to do more than that. You need to look at what services you provide. Looking at council agendas and requests to council all the time, there is always an increasing list of things council are being asked to do, fund, or undertake, and yet there's a decreasing pot available to do that. This is a good time, using your asset management plan as it exists today, to start a dialogue with the residents as to what is sustainable, and that includes the pocketbook. There's a lot of requirements out there, both from the regional district, but we as taxpayers, we end up paying for all of this one way or another, every single one of us. And I think it would be a very, very good time to start taking this dialogue out there and talking to ratepayers about what they actually are prepared to pay for. I know there's concern when we talk core services and whether services would be cut. Well, they might. Maybe we do have some service levels that aren't affordable at the extension they are today. That's very possible. I don't think core service review is as much about efficiencies at the moment it is what it is as a core function of the city that we deliver to our ratepayers and what they're prepared to pay for. So you might consider undertaking that review with the citizens. It doesn't require a $150,000 consultant to do it. It does require getting into dialogue with your citizens and our citizens, myself and others, into a formal process to come up with what is affordable over the longer term, knowing where we're at financially. So I want to say to council and to staff, congratulations. You're ahead of the game, and that is important. It's not a nice game, it's not a pleasant game, but it's a very realistic game. And it's where we must be to be able to sustain our citizens, sustain our community, and sustain our economy. You all get the Asset Management BC newsletter, and there are going to be some very interesting articles in it. I received our new article today from Mr. Gord Hume, who's well known in these circles, and he offered to do a feature article for us. He is the one that has said we're not looking strong enough at our infrastructure, and that what we're putting forth as a deficit probably is low. It will be very interesting reading. So congratulations, a lot of work ahead and a lot of things to do, both for you and for us as citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. We do have a question for you before you go. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Mr. Wells, very much. You almost answered the question at the end of your presentation, where it pertains to involving the citizenry. Asset management is probably the least sexy one of the 6 urgent things that we have identified out of the strategic plan. That said, I completely agree with you that we need to make an effort to involve the citizenry to the utmost. But I'm not quite sure how we are going to do that, because the subject matter is not of great interest to large numbers in this municipality. So I'm looking for suggestions from you how we should do that.
I don't know that I can give you all of those suggestions tonight, Councillor Paggi. I have given it an awful lot of thought. We have to be careful with language. I met with a CEO in the Northwest Territories recently who told me he knew nothing about asset management, and I asked him what he'd done for 20 years, and all he'd done is manage assets. So we have to be really careful that we don't put language in front of the public just because that's what we like to use as technical people or professionals. I think what the public will understand is we've got some very big bills ahead of us. And we only have, I think it's 7 cents on the tax dollar now comes to you as a municipality, and a lot of competition will be there in the provincial and federal governments for grant. Where I think we can go with our ratepayers is rephrase the language as what are you prepared to pay for over what period of time in relation to what the city believes they need to spend.
And that would include what are you willing to do without as far as services are concerned?
It may be. It may be.
Okay, thank you.
I see no further questions, Mr. Wells. I just want to thank you very much. Very profound, very interesting, as always. Every time you make a presentation, it's always well done and very thoughtful. And I hope we can, as a city, can come to you from time to time and take advantage of your expertise and knowledge on this subject. And I do want to comment that staff has, for some time now, been, I don't want to use the word warning, but cautioning council that the infrastructure is something that needs to be addressed. If it's left, it'll get right out of hand. So that's the reason I mentioned earlier that we've set aside that 1% of next year's budget, or the recommendation is to set 1% aside simply for infrastructure replacement. And I think it's so important. But thank you again. Very insightful.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, we'll move along to 8A, Community Safety and Development, and it's the disposition of 238 Franklin Street, City Hall Annex. Staff recommendation that Council approve the disposition of 238 Franklin Street to Tectonica Management Limited, Incorporated, I beg your pardon.
Move staff's recommendation.
Second, moved and seconded. Discussion, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. On page 2 or 26 of the staff report, it 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs down, it indicates a Section 219 covenant in favor of the city will be registered on title, which will prohibit occupancy of the building until it is seismically upgraded or demolished. So my question is, if we approve this and we move forward, and the owner has occupants in the building with this covenant on it, in the event of a catastrophic event that causes damage or injury or loss of life, who is liable?
The intent of this covenant is to ensure that there is not loss of life, and that the building would not be occupied unless the upgrade is done.
And a follow-up, Your Worship, then once this is approved as of closing date January 14, then based on that response, the building will be occupied, and members of public and employees to the numbers in the neighborhood of 30, plus or minus, as I understand, will occupy the building until June of 2013. So are we or are we not following the covenant?
Well, Your Worship, that covenant is not in place yet. That would apply once the property is sold. From our perspective at staff, we have a long-term plan in place that we're well in progress, moving all the staff out of the Franklin Street building into other premises. There's 30 left to go. We've tested our plan with the WorkSafe authorities, and it's our opinion, after consultation with them, that we're meeting our requirements in terms of due diligence and moving it as expeditiously as possible.
That doesn't answer my question. So I clearly understand that we have a plan, and I clearly understand that there's going to be people inside that venue still, but we've made it clear that people are not permitted to be in that building unless it's been seismically upgraded. So my question is, who would be liable in the event of a catastrophic event
Mr. Kenny,
causing life, damage, or injury?
If I can, I think the issue here basically is that title and ownership of that building will be a year away before Tectonica. If they choose to do it, will decide whether or not to take advantage of this option. They may turn it down once they do their due diligence and for whatever reason determine it isn't worth going ahead. In any event, until that happens, and I'm suggesting about a year from now, the building is owned by the city and it's still our responsibility.
Yes, and it's my opinion that the liability of the city and the citizens and the taxpayers is mitigated through the management steps that have been taken to proactively move people out of the building, and then that we have a plan in place to move the rest of them. And it's our opinion, after obtaining legal advice and consulting with WorkSafe BC, that the exposure of the taxpayers is as minimal as possible.
Thank you. If we approve this disposition this evening, Tectonica does not take ownership for 12 months or 24 months. Who takes ownership if we approve this tonight?
Well, the Tectonica takes ownership in 2014.
So they have 2 years or 1 year in which
to undertake their due diligence to identify whether they wish to proceed or not.
So the covenant that we have included, we are negating for ourselves?
No, that covenant is applied once the transfer takes place to ensure that the new owner is as responsible in terms of taking action to avoid it as a long-term place of employment as responsible as the city has been.
And WorkSafe does not preside over seismic events in their application of what WorkSafe represents.
Your Worship, WorkSafe has taken the position that because the numbers of buildings in British Columbia that would be deficient from in terms of a seismic review would be so copious in numbers, it is not realistic to expect that they could adjudicate all of those buildings and make orders with respect to all of those workplaces. So while they could choose to make orders in that regard, they have chosen not to at this time.
Thank you. So then my understanding is that we're liable should anything happen for the occupancy of that building with
the city as the owners. However, it's our opinion that that liability is minimized through the proactive management plan we have in place.
Thank you.
Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. This is directed at staff. I was wondering why we're just asking for the purchaser to upgrade, seismically upgrade the building to 60% of current BC building code. Is this just a case of if we ask them, is it not possible to do 100? Is it too much money to do 100?
The National Research Council standards are to upgrade existing buildings to 60% of the current building code. Yes, buildings could be upgraded to 100%, but in most cases that is extremely expensive and likely cost prohibitive because they have to start with the foundations, work up through the building to try and achieve that 100%.
Another question, Your Worship? Then, for example, residences that put a secondary suite in, for example, they have to upgrade to, would that be considered a 100% upgrade, or is that just a different upgrade?
It's a different circumstance in that case is that the residents, a house putting in a suite is not a change of use. They do not have to do seismic upgrading in that case. The new provincial building code that has just come into force requires a different standard of seismic upgrading for housing, and as new applications come in, that will be evaluated, but in general, existing buildings will not be required to be upgraded as they were built to the code of the day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I'm having real trouble supporting the issue just on the basis of the whole issue. First off, it was a seismic safety issue that we wanted to move people out of that building. That was the issue. It's a seismic safety issue. But I understand WorkSafe now, it's the first time I've heard over the last day we've had some information on that WorkSafe doesn't value the seismic risk at that point. Is that what you were saying? They don't value the seismic risk in concerning themselves with safety at the workplace.
What WorkSafe will look at is to make sure there's a number of sections of the WorkSafe regulation relating to a safe workplace. But with respect to a threat of a seismic nature, so for example, the annex, the only danger that we're aware of is in the event of a significant seismic event. So in a circumstance like that, they're not writing orders with respect to the seismic vulnerability.
Thank you. If I can continue then. And staff made the recommendation for a seismic upgrade on this building. Currently under our laws, if that building stayed as office use, in other applications around our community, they wouldn't have to do any seismic upgrade. But if they change the use of the building, they have to do an upgrade. Am I correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think one of the things that needs to be reviewed here, or at least talked about, is the deal itself. I've had many members of the public have approached myself, and I'm sure my colleagues on council, numerous times with numerous questions about the deal. And I have to tell you, I've looked at the deal 17 different ways to Sunday, and I believe that what is happening here now is a good deal for the community and for the building and for its future. But if there's anybody out there, it's a complicated deal. If there's anybody out there that wants to talk about it, I would personally be happy to talk to anyone about it. So, and I'm sure every member on council would be happy to discuss it at length with any concerned citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Rattan has asked me to take over in his absence, and I was the next speaker, but I will defer to you, Diane, to speak.
Okay, well, I just, I obviously have concerns about our staff still being located in that building. I think all of us share those concerns. We have had staff in there for a couple of years since the issue was identified, and we're being asked to approve. Tonight we're being asked to approve the deal with Tectonica, but on the issue of whether there can still be people in there, I think the driving issue, as I understood it, and I wasn't here, so please, tell me that I've got it wrong if I do. But one of the driving issues was that the annex building was the seat of government for Nanaimo. And that's why we, the city, wanted to have in place a higher standard with regard to any seismic event, so that if there was a seismic event, we wanted to have a building that was safe so that the government processes of the city could continue on, and that the 60% level that we could be brought up to wasn't good enough to give us those kinds of assurances about municipal government continuing on. So, having said that, I'm really anxious to see this work done and these people moved out, because I think that's a concern. I do understand the reasoning for building a new building, given the seismic challenges that we have. But I would really urge our staff to, as much as possible, move these employees out of there as soon as humanly possible.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I share Councillor Brennan's thoughts and concerns. Also, I would just ask staff for clarification, please, that in the event that the annex building does not have a change of use, and we approve this tonight and we transfer, and there's 2 years in which to determine what the expression of interest to do with that building, if it remains the same or a lesser use, there's no requirement to seismically upgrade to 60% or any other number.
Your Worship, no, that's not correct. The process that staff recommended that Council approved was that we not allow the continuation of office use after the building transfers until the upgrade is completed or the building is demolished. What Councillor Kipp was referring to was in the private sector, if they're occupying a building that is seismically deficient, they can continue to use that until the use changes to a different use, at which time they would need a building permit, at which time they'd have to do the seismic upgrade.
So we are not following the Canadian Building Code practice that if it remains the same use, they wouldn't require it to be upgraded. We don't require it to be upgraded.
You're correct that Council made a decision that selling the building, if it wasn't good enough for us to be in it, and this is a seismically deficient building that is so serious that I don't know of any comparable buildings within Nanaimo. I don't have that information, but this was serious enough that Council believed that if it wasn't good enough for our staff, why would we sell it to someone in the event of a seismic event that tore it down? That would not be looked on favorably.
Thank you. Well, I certainly do concur that I look forward to new and better use of the site and the building, and I also concur that in the interests of the staff of the time to relocate as swiftly as humanly possible, and I think that we shouldn't be putting staff back into that building in view of the fact that we undertook the work that we did to ensure the safety of employees and the public. So while I'm going to support this recommendation, I would certainly hope that we, beyond the management plan that we have, which I understand is to have people housed in that venue for up to 6 months, while this work is being undertaken to determine its moving forward position, I would hope that we can do something to mitigate those months and have the people relocated as soon as possible. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm gratified to hear that we're going to make this a priority and have staff moved out of the offices, as the annex, as quickly as possible, as well as our Worship. The Mayor is also going to be located in those premises for the next 6 months. So, but my question to you is, earlier today we spoke about this predicament, if you will, and you said that the occupants of the building will be in the safest part of the building. Can you explain how this part of the building may be perhaps safer than other areas?
Your Worship, to Councillor Johnston, the portion of the building where the Mayor and other staff are moving into was built in 1954 to a higher standard than the original building was built in 1937. That was one of the reasons to move into that section of the building. And so in evaluating the building, it was determined it was the most, the newer part of the building and therefore the safer part of the building.
Does this part of the building have rebar so it wouldn't collapse if...
It has a minimal rebar, while the remainder of the building has none from the evaluations undertaken. Again, it's still deficient, but not nearly as to the level of the rest of the building.
Good, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. To staff as well. Just a little explanation about the purchase and sale agreement on page 27, where it pertains to the purchaser's condition precedent and then below that the vendor one. Both of those speak of 120 days due diligence to satisfy that the land is free of contaminants. I don't quite understand that. Why is it a condition of both the vendor and the purchaser? Am I clear in my question, or?
Sorry, I do not understand the question.
Okay. You look at purchaser's condition precedent, 120-day due diligence to conduct environmental testing of the soil and cost associated with demolishing. And I suppose that 120 days will take effect if we approve that today.
Your Worship, that's just a clause that both the purchaser and ourselves wanted for concurrence on that the environmental issues had been dealt with, because we're the owner. So if there's pollution, there's potentially an issue that we would have to pay for the cleanup. So we'd want to both have that as a condition precedent for both.
So it's not overlapping, in other words? No. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. Just on the building itself, the newest section of the building, is that not the most westerly section at the firewall where bylaw was most recently reported?
To Councillor Kipp, the history of the building, it was built in 37. The westerly portion was put in 54, and the third story was put on in the early 70s, I believe. So it followed that order.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Worship. I'd like to call the question.
Okay. Basically, all we're doing is receiving the report regarding the progress on the strategic.
We're approving the disposition.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've got that wrong line there. Okay, so I don't think we need to have the motion read again. All those in favor?
I think we should read it out.
Sorry?
No.
Okay. Again, all those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Kipp opposed. Is that what you want to read out again? Yeah. Okay, balance of council in favor, and the motion passes. We're going into down into the road closure portion of Meredith Road, adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, and staff recommendation of Council 1. Receive the report pertaining to highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road, adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7161. 2. Authorize the transfer of a portion of Meredith Road adjacent to the 1720 Meredith Road to Nanaimo Church of Christ, property owner at 1720 Meredith Road, for the sum of $139,500. 3. Direct the mayor and corporate officer to execute the conditional contract of purchase and sale. And 4. Direct staff to proceed with public notice of the road closure of a portion of Meredith Road.
So move staff recommendations 1, 2, 3, and 4.
1, 2, 3, and 4. Thank you. Moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. By the bylaw adjacent, and that is the highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7161. 1. That highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7161, passed first reading.
So moved, Your Worship.
Moved. Seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And 2, that highway closure and dedication removal portion of Meredith Road adjacent to 1720 Meredith Road, bylaw 2013 number 7161, pass second reading.
Move recommendation number 2, Your Worship.
Moved and seconded. Still no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We move into item C, LA 000085, application for a structural change to an existing liquor primary license, Vancouver Island University, building 300 at 900 5th Street. Staff recommendation the council receive the report regarding the application for a structural change for an existing liquor primary license at the Vancouver Island University, building 300 at 900 5th Street.
So move the council receive the report for information, Your Worship.
Okay, moved and seconded. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Deck and ramp at 499 7th Street, item D. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to unauthorized structure at 499 7th Street. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 499 7th Street? Staff recommendation of council pursuant to section 72 and 73 of the community charter, order the owner of 499 7th Street to remove the structure or bring it up to a standard within 30 days, or the work will be done by the city or its agents at the owner's cost. Moved. Is there a second, or we'll get it on for speaking? You're moved and seconded. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm having trouble understanding this one here. The issue at hand is that no permit was applied for?
If I can, just for clarity, I think what happened, there was a structure there before. It pre-existed and therefore was grandfathered in. The owner of the property, to my understanding, elected for whatever reason to take it down, and then without applying for a building license, went ahead, building permit, I'm sorry, went ahead and built the new one contrary to the Act.
So my question would be, why removal?
It doesn't meet the code. Does anyone want to make a comment on it?
Thank you, Your Worship. We're looking for removal and construction of a new one that meets the building code. As part of any business license application where we note that there's not access in accordance with the code, then we would pursue that.
Mr. Siebert, did you want to make a comment?
The wording of the bylaw recommendation is upgrade or remove. Certainly our goal is to see upgrade, but at this time the owner is not coming forward to do that, so that's why we're bringing it forward for council's consideration.
So would this also require, Your Worship, supplemental, would this also require a $750 fee for a development variance permit?
Yes.
So a fellow is replacing a ramp that may or may not have been rotten or needed repair, not knowing that there would be a building permit required for another one, and now we're going to get him for $750 for a permit because of a development variance situation?
As the mayor noted, is the deck was removed at some time in the past. Under today's rules, the zoning bylaw, the deck is cannot encroach into that area, and therefore the only mechanism to legalize that would be through a development variance permit.
How could he have prevented this?
To come and talk to staff prior to removing it and ask what his steps would be to do it, one, towards correctly to code, and two, to the zoning bylaw, and we would have advised him to proceed with the construction, and he wouldn't have required a variance because he wouldn't have removed his deck at that time.
Okay. Is there a mechanism in place that we can circumvent the variance permit requirement at this point? By election?
Well, Your Worship, Council always has the option of not enforcing its bylaws. However, in doing so, you should think of the precedent that you'd be establishing. They are your bylaws. You set those fees for a purpose, and you have the right to vary them.
Yep.
I think maybe, I don't know if there is I think we need to pass this tonight, in my opinion, but nonetheless, I encourage the owner to get a hold of city staff and see if there is something that can be done. We'll, in my opinion, move this anyway and have it there, but I don't know if the 11th hour, it'll still be a 30-day period. If he wishes to try to have a discussion with staff and to find out what his obligations are, late as it is, better late than never, I think. So I see no further questions on it, and maybe on the motion then, would someone like to move that then?
It's been moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move into unresolved building efficiencies. Notice on title, section 5.7. It's requested that council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to the unresolved building deficiencies for the properties listed below. Staff recommendation that council, by resolution, instruct the corporate officer to file a bylaw contravention notice respecting the properties listed below at the land survey the Land Title and Survey Authority of British Columbia under section 5.7 of the Community Charter. The first property, and I may just quickly ask, I guess, to staff, none of these have been pulled? Who's going to be doing that?
That's correct. None have been pulled at this time.
So item 1 is 2697 Beaver Creek Crescent, illegal construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Is there anyone in attendance here in the audience tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 2697 Beaver Creek Crescent? The second property is 59 Captain Morgan's Boulevard, occupancy of a single-family dwelling without an occupancy permit. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 59 Captain Morgan's Boulevard? The third item is 2502 Nadley Crescent, illegal construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Is there anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 2502 Nadley Crescent? The fourth is 646 Farquhar Street, unsafe construction of a deck without the required inspections. Is there anyone in attendance that would like to speak to matters related to 646 Farquhar Street? And the fifth item is 4944 Rutherford Road, illegal construction of a secondary suite without a building permit. Is anyone in attendance tonight that would like to speak to matters related to 4944 Rutherford Road? And seeing none, if somebody would like to move.
Staff's recommendation on 1 through 5.
1 through 5. Is there a seconder? Moved and seconded. No other discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Move over to 9A, delegations pertaining to the 2013-2017 financial plan.
Move staff recommendation that council receive this report.
Okay, we've got somebody coming.
Could we ask first?
Yeah, that's item 9A is delegations. If there's any delegations pertaining to the 2013-2017 financial plan. Welcome, sir.
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Over the Christmas holidays, I had a chance to look at the 2013-2017 financial plan. I see we're looking at tax increases in the neighborhood of 20+%. In 2013, the numbers are $89,685,666, and in 2017, it's estimated to be in the neighborhood of $110,320,044. That's a net increase in total of over $20,634,378. On top of that, we have user fees that are going to be rising in the area of 18%, and an operating budget that's going from $123,159,351 to $144,252,968, for a net increase of $21,093,617. Could someone explain to me precisely, or give me a vague idea of what exactly is in the operating budget itself?
Ms. Kenny, you want to have a go at that?
We'd be happy to. I didn't bring my budget document with me today. I don't know if Mr. Clements has, but we're more than pleased to sit down with Mr. Fuller at his convenience any day of the week.
So you can't give me a vague idea of what's in the operating budget? What does it consist of?
It consists of fire services, police services, development services, roads, storm drainage, all the services that are provided to the citizens of this community.
So that is, the working on the roads is paid out of that? That seems to be quite a bit over a period of just 5 years. If I was running a business, I'd be kind of concerned about that. With these facts located in the 2013-2017 financial plan, and the fact that last year, I recall reading in the paper towards the end of the budget discussion, there was a article that said it's a little too late to trim what little fat is on the budget. Can someone possibly tell me, and I would like to hope that council and staff have communicated with each other or are soon going to communicate with each other, different ways of alleviating these increases on the citizens. After all, you heard from Mr. Wells tonight, the pot isn't limitless. So I would assume that pretty soon.
Well, we're going to, Mr. Fuller, if I can, we're going to be having many meetings with council and certainly staff on the budget items. The very final one doesn't have to be prepared and entered until the 15th of May. So between now and January and May, I wouldn't want to guess how many meetings we'll have, but a lot of them. And I can assure you, I think everyone on council, I speak for everyone on council, saying, and staff as well, that we're going to do everything we can to keep the increases to a minimum. But you saw the presentation, you spoke about Mr. Wells, and you saw the presentation that staff made about the shortfall there is in infrastructure funding. So what staff is recommending is that 1% of this future budget, and it's a recommendation only, it's not etched in stone, but staff has recommended that council look at setting aside 1% on the next budget simply for infrastructure replacement, because it's a huge cost, you know. And I just, all I can say is we're going to look at everything. We're not going to just go ahead and rubber stamp anything. There are a few months left on it till the 15th of May, and we'll look at it time and time again. Your points are taken.
Okay.
It's expensive.
Well, let's not just leave it to the last minute.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. Just a quick point for clarification. In the discussion of the asset management this evening, it was discussed that we would be raising 1% in 2013, 2% in 14, 3%, and up to 5%.
Ms. Kenny, do you want to clarify that?
I believe that those
or maybe Mr.
represented in the
Mr. Clements, one or the other?
Previously presented, was it?
No, yes, that's correct, and that's the plan.
Pardon?
That is correct.
It was, but it was not in the original document passed out in December, or was it?
No, it was.
Okay, that's all I needed to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I see no one else. We'll move along into 9B.
We'll move that council receive the report for information.
Okay, on that one too. Sorry, I was just looking at 9A, and it was just delegations to the financial plan. But we're doing it 9B now. Am I not reading this correctly here? So the strategic plan implementation progress, and staff recommends that council receive the report regarding progress on strategic plan implementation. That's what you're going to move. And you'll second that. We'll have on that one, all those in favor?
Question.
Well, there is, okay, sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm just going to try to add something else to this, that's all. So I didn't get...
If you...
No, go ahead.
Okay. Under the strategic priority of taking responsibility, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullet says adopt a public service excellence program. Could you just explain to me what that program is?
Your Worship, that was a suggestion that came out from the community, and it's something that as a staff we intend to do a little more research on, find out what other communities are doing in the way of excellence in terms of service delivery, and try and develop a model based on that research.
Okay, so first is that council receive the report regarding the progress one. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? And what I'd like to ask now is that somebody may wish to make a motion that Council establish a governance policy, structure, and process review committee to oversee the process as mandated by Council on 2012 November 5, and appoint Councillors Greaves, Johnstone, and Kipp to be the representatives on that committee. Moved, seconded. Any discussion on that? All those. Councillor Bestwick.
And thank you, Your Worship. I don't disagree with the formation. I'm just curious as to what the mandate and objectives of the three-person committee are.
I think basically just to look at governance policy, structure and the process review as it unfolds, and report back to Council on their recommendations. Do you want to elaborate on that?
I can, sure, Your Worship. As Council's aware, one of the priorities is to undertake a governance review. That Council has directed that move forward. I think it's this committee would be modeled after the Strategic Planning Committee that provided guidance to staff in implementing Council's direction, assisting with the finalization of the selection of the consultant to undertake the work, and to provide guidance to that consultant as they proceed through the work.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that this committee be struck and those three members sit on it. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We're moving into item C, user rate increase bylaw. Staff recommendation that Council receive the report pertaining to sewer regulation and charge amendment bylaw 2013 number 2496.25, waterworks rate and regulation amendment bylaw 2013 number 7004.07, southwest bulk water rate amendment bylaw 2013 number 7099.03, and municipal solid waste collection amendment bylaw 2013 number 7128.02.
Move the staff recommendation to receive the report.
On all four items,
all
okay.
Four items.
And moved and seconded. I see no discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Bylaws, and now we'll deal with the bylaw portion, which is the sewer regulation and charge amendment bylaw 2013, number 2496.25, to replace Schedule B of the bylaw. And maybe just for clarification from staff on this thing, should we move that part first and then do 1, 2, 3, or do the whole items all at one time?
Your Worship, are you talking about one?
I'm talking about the bylaw, sewer regulation down there, and what I'm suggesting is, should we move first just that two-line sentence there to replace Schedule B? Do we get a motion on that, or should we just read that and then continue on with 1, 2, and 3 related to it?
Your Worship, just 1, 2, and 3.
Okay.
Just with respect to the three readings.
That's all part of the bylaw. So that one, that sewer regulation and charge amendment bylaw 2013 number 2496.25 pass first reading. And if somebody would like to move that, move. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. In item 2, that sewer regulation and charge amendment bylaw 2013 number 2496.25 pass second reading. Move. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that sewer regulation and charge amendment bylaw 2013 number 2496.25 pass third reading. Move. Second. Councilor Bestwick.
Thank you. And all of these rate increase fees are going into a fund for us to take the interests to put toward our asset management plan. Is that?
That's correct for this 5% sewer rate increase. For the water rate increase, there's two components. The 5% that was previously approved to pay for the new infrastructure that's going ahead, the water treatment plant and the new supply, as well as a component now going to asset management. And then with the solid waste collection bylaw, that's to cover the higher costs of collection related to the new trucks and the higher tipping fees at the regional waste facility.
So the new trucks will be funded out of this increase, financed out of this increase?
The municipal solid waste bylaws there you see, yes, part of the higher cost of the trucks is causing the need for an increase to the garbage user rates. That's part of the reason.
And how many new trucks will we be having on the road then to?
I believe we've got 4 split packer trucks.
And they're all functioning to our needs and requirements?
I believe there's the normal breakdowns, but to my knowledge, they're meeting our needs, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so it has been moved and seconded on items 1 through 3. I'm looking for a nod. I didn't get one, but I'm assuming we're ready. So all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move into Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7004.07 to replace Schedules A and B of the bylaw. 1, that the Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7004.07 pass first reading.
So moved.
Moved and second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. 2, that the Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7004.07 pass second reading. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that the Waterworks Rate and Regulation Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7004.07 pass third reading. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Now we're dealing with Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7099.03 to replace Section 3 of the bylaw. And item 1, that the Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7099.03 pass first reading. Moved. Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Item 2, that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7099.03 pass second reading. Moved. Moved and seconded. A little slow in the draw. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that Southwest Bulk Water Rate Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7099.03 pass third reading. Moved by Councillor McKay, seconded by Councillor Anderson, reluctantly. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7128.02 to replace Schedule A of the bylaw. 1, that the Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7128.02 passed first reading. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And 2, that Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7128.02 pass second reading. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And finally, that the Municipal Solid Waste Collection Amendment Bylaw 2013 number 7128.02 pass third reading. And moved and seconded. And seconded. And seconded. And Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. Just rates and charges on Schedule A. It indicates number 4, the fee for garbage tags. For an additional garbage is $2 per tag. Is this for yard? Will we be providing a yard waste service for increasing these charges? Or how are we going to go about tackling
These tags are for additional garbage cans. We currently don't provide yard waste collection.
So is there any thought and or consideration with the increased fees to provide the service of waste pickup? Is there any consideration?
So, Your Worship, just as a word of explanation, this fee increase is 3.9%, and it's due to increased tipping fees at the regional landfills. So taking the same garbage to the landfill is costing more. Plus, as I said, the cost associated with the new split packer vehicles. So this doesn't provide any additional funds to commence a service for yard waste. If Council has considered that in the past, and to this point has declined to take on that additional service, that's certainly something Council could do if it wished, but it would require a further increase.
Yeah, additional cost. Okay. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Moving into the quarterly single submission purchases, staff recommendation that Council receive the report regarding quarterly single submission purchases. Move. Second. Councillor Besson, are you on for that? No. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the quarterly direct award purchases, staff recommendation that council receive the report regarding quarterly direct award purchases. Moved and seconded. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Question to staff, if I may, with regards to the Cloncrip and Berger Award of $72,180. It's on page 70. Does that include the 2 concurrent studies that are going to be held on remediation and renewal?
Your Worship, this is the work that is identified with deconstruction, and but primarily, I believe this is the work related to the environmental work that's been done related to the deconstruction.
Okay, so the cost of the other 2 concurrent studies are still coming for this year?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The item F is the 2013 FCM resolutions. Staff recommendation that Council 1, identify any topics on which Council wishes staff to draft resolutions, and 2, direct staff to present any such resolutions to the 2013 January 21 Committee of the Whole meeting for consideration of adoption and submission to the FCM, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, for consideration in their 2013 annual general meeting.
Staff recommendation 1 and 2.
1 and 2. Is there a seconder? Please. Thank you. Moved and seconded. All those in favor? Pulling teeth here. Motion passes. And now Overleaf Community Services, 10A, Millstone Trunk Sewer Design. Staff recommendation of Council to approve funding of $80,000 to be allocated from Sanitary DCC Fund Reserve for the engineering design and the Millstone sewer upgrade from Buttertubs Drive to Pride Avenue. Moved. Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And 10B, the seismic screening of City of Nanaimo buildings. Staff recommendation that Council receive the report regarding seismic screening of City of Nanaimo buildings. Moved. Second. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the Diana Krall washroom, Diana Krall Plaza washroom. Can't be right all the time. Well, maybe she would use it. Anyway, a staff recommendation that Council consider the higher service level request for the provision of public washroom facilities at Diana Krall Plaza as part of the 2013-2017 financial plan discussion.
Your Worship.
And Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. This is where I wish to make a motion, which will read as follows: that Council approve the higher service level request for the provision of public washroom facilities at Diana Krall Plaza in order to reduce the existing concerns and complaints related to public urination and to continue Council's effort to improve the downtown.
Second. Moved and seconded. Discussion. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship.
Oops,
Thank you, Your Worship. I cannot support this based on the amount of money that we're talking about here. There was another higher service level that was put forward that the city manager does not support, and that is the complete and total review of the entire sign bylaws of Nanaimo. So my question is how many people does it affect for $100,000 roughly? And I would suggest that because that number was used for an estimate for a complete review of the sign bylaw as mandated or as indicated by the work plan or the proposed work plan for 2013 for the Development Process Review Committee, that if we're going to spend $100,000, I would rather that we forego this and put it into the sign bylaw review by the DPRC.
Okay, Councillor Greaves.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I will be supporting this, but I think it's kind of a delicate subject, but I would think that this would be better used by tourists than than drunks, I guess is the word. Knowing what I know about that, I think it's a great addition, and we need it downtown. And there's nothing worse than walking around as a tourist and not knowing where to go to the washroom. So I support it.
Okay, I just want to say, and there's several more people that would like to speak too, but I certainly support it. And, you know, I think the City of Portland has some 7 installed now. Victoria has installed 1. And, you know, I can't confirm that the Patchaloo is the name we're going to put on this one here. But, you know, it's so important that we need to provide proper facilities. And particularly as bar closing, the number of people out there working in the downtown core, as I do all the time, and not being there in the late evening, of course. But I know there's a serious problem with it, and I think Councillor Patchy may want to comment, or may not, on the fact that he was doing a drive along with the RCMP, and the number of occasions where they stop people during the procedure was quite substantial, and it's an ongoing problem, and I quite concur with Councillor Greaves. I think tourists would appreciate the convenience, but I think really for people that are disadvantaged and spending a lot of time on the street, it's a necessity, and you know, we can't expect to see major changes in the downtown without providing the proper facilities for them. I totally support it. Councillor Greaves, did you have anything to add to it? No. Councillor Patchy next.
I'm on.
You're on.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the support so far. As you alluded to, I've been on a couple of night patrols with the RCMP, and I can tell you that the procedure, quote unquote, is pretty amazing. This city has issued 324 tickets for public urination in the last year alone, and if that's not enough of an indication of what we should be doing, then I don't know what is. You know, the fact of the matter is that this would be a facility that will be clean. It will be a public male-female washroom that will serve as much of a purpose during the daytime as it will when the bars let out. I'm convinced of that. I would defy any of you to go with the RCMP and at 2 o'clock in the morning stand outside Mambo's Pizza, where there's a long lineup and a lot of people are not there for pizza, I can tell you. It is extremely important that we do that. It's part of improving the downtown, and it needs to be.
Councillor Johnstone.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, I will support this initiative. I'm wondering about the cost. Is this a cost estimate that came down from the Portland people? Is it the same, modeled after the same? Seems like a lot of money, $100,000 for an outdoor toilet. Is it hooked up to sewer, or is it portable, or what?
Hooked up to
I know
both.
It's got water on the outside of the
It'll be connected
facility.
to both sewer and water.
It'd be connected.
Sewer and water.
And have we gotten any quotes for building such a loo, a portable?
I believe this is modeled after the one put into Victoria, and the costs based on what they spent.
Will we go to tender on something like this?
We'll certainly, I don't know whether there's only one supplier of this or not. We'll certainly try and get the best price, but there may be only one supplier, so there may not be a tender.
So the cost could come down.
Well, conjecture.
This is our best estimate at this time.
I think we should point out that this is a very unique design. There is a sink and hand washing facility, but that's outside the structure, which is, I think, kind of interesting. So that I think that it will be used. I think it's a very, very expensive undertaking, but you can't expect to see changes in what Councillor Patchy and others have seen, and myself as well, downtown, without providing the opportunity for them to go elsewhere, I guess.
Spend that on the house.
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Worship. I'm not familiar with this unit, but if there is one in Victoria, I'd appreciate just getting the address. I'd like to just go and have a look at it. I certainly support that we provide conveniences for people 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. particularly in our downtown core that is tourist-driven. Clearly, there's electrical in this, and it will be a 24/7 operation 7 days of the week. I trust that would be the case.
Yes, to my knowledge, that's right. And we can provide you with that address in Victoria.
Councillor Brennan has a question. I just would like to ask, do we have any, is it premature, or do we have any figures on what the ongoing operational costs, the cleaning, obviously, and so on? Sorry? About 10 grand on top of that, so I'm just for the benefit of the people in attendance. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to be supporting this. The property owners, the shopkeepers have expressed the problems that they encounter daily and usually every morning downtown with public urination. And it's difficult to open up shop when you walk through your front door to your front door, and it's been used as a urinal. It's sometimes gruesome, and I can tell you I've had that experience myself. Working downtown, parking lot was behind the office building, and some mornings it was awfully gruesome to come in and get to work, because it was a nice private area, and people don't have washrooms downtown. So while Councillor Paggi defies people to go out at 2 o'clock in the morning, I defy them to come down at 8 a.m. and see what's happened overnight. It's a public health issue, and I think we need to do this. I think it's a long time coming, and we're finally deciding that it's an important thing to do for the downtown, and I'm really glad to see we're doing it.
Okay. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. I can't believe my ears. I just can't believe this. That we're going to spend $100,000 for a toilet?
That's right. Well, we have to vote on it yet.
Well, I just can't believe my ears. $100,000 for a toilet, so that we can deal with some issues relative to some people who are urinating in the middle of the night. This should be the responsibility of the bar owners, not the city. This is crazy that we would consider this. I can't believe my ears.
Well, I think it's fair.
I can't vote in favor.
Okay, you can say, well, that's your choice. I think one of the issues is that we can't really blame the bar owners for all of it. There are people that actually live on the streets, and they're also vulnerable to this and need some kind of a facility. And I think if you're going to do it properly and spend the money and have something that'll last for years rather than, I think they have a design that's going to reduce vandalism and a number of issues. So I'm not justifying the price, but I strongly feel we need it. Councillor Paggi. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kipp is next. I beg your pardon. Sorry. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I support the concept. I mean, I know downtown kids leave the bars or people leave the bar at night. They're not allowed back in to use the facilities. They have to stay out. It's been a mess down there. But I mean, lately it's been interesting. At the regional district, we had a $20,000 bathroom on a fire hall put on, $20,000 addition for a bathroom on the fire hall in Arrington. And then we had a $690,000 bathroom proposed at the facility, the transfer station. So these are like hugely expensive. I know there's one supplier, but there must be some metal manufacturers in town. I mean, I've been in the ones in Europe. They work very well. They're very efficient. But $100,000 does seem like a lot to me, too. I mean, it'd be nice to squeeze down some of that price. I mean, it just seems expensive. I mean, it's a how many square foot is this?
It's 6 by 10 feet footprint.
So 60 square feet.
It's a one-seater.
It's a one-seater?
Yeah, it's for one person. That's why it has the hand wash outside of the unit. It's
the process.
It's finished so that it does prevent vandalism or easy to remove the graffiti. We've looked at other alternatives. There are some very expensive units that, go into the ground or operate like a car wash. This is actually quite cost-effective in terms of these units.
When you say go into the ground, I think you want to explain that the whole washroom actually just sinks into the ground. It's retractable.
It kind of disappears into plus or whatever. It is $100,000. That's correct. Well, it's $90,000 for the unit. It's fabricated in Oregon. That would be the one we would purchase. It would be delivered on site, and then we'd have to do the water and sewer connections. We haven't determined the site as yet on Diana Krall Plaza. That would be a factor in the cost. And we'd work with the DNBIA and the RCMP in terms of the optimum location.
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question before it escapes my memory here? There's some confusion. Someone said just a single seat, but I thought earlier I heard that there was a separate men's and women. Is it unisex?
No, it is fully.
This one?
Yeah, one person, but it's fully accessible. Wheelchairs, bicycles, strollers can enter these units.
Okay, Councillor Kip, sorry.
Oh yeah, I've seen ones in Europe that are just little spun metal cases, and there is a hole in the ground in some of them, and some with a seat in that. But they didn't. I mean, I've seen the ones that go right into the ground. You pay a euro to get into it, and they actually disappear right in the ground at certain hours. But
you want to get out on time.
It's huge, yeah, you want to get out. It's hugely expensive. So I support the concept, but the price terrorizes me. Thank you.
Councillor Patchy.
I just want to respond to Councillor McKay's having made a connection between the bar owners. The liquor control rules prevent people from going back when closing hour comes. They are literally forced out, and the problem is there. And I don't know how else you fix it other than beautifying the downtown with more porta potties, and I don't think that's an option for the downtown that we've all been working so hard for.
Councillor Bestwick.
No, thank you, Your Worship. All the questions.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, you have something?
Yes, I have a question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the report, it says during the summer of 2012, the city and DMBIA in a cost-share partnership installed a portable washroom unit. Was there discussion to possibly cost-share this Porta Land Loo?
We have had some discussion with the DNBIA. At this point, they haven't really come forward with any financial contribution. They fully support this idea. That's fully supported by the business in the downtown.
Just further to that, Your Worship, I think it's pretty clear that the BIA's funding is committed in other areas, and they don't have the money for this without taking it away from other commitments. And I believe that this is an important thing to do in the near term.
Okay. If I may just, like my colleagues, I completely support the idea, not that I'm one of the people who's down there at 2 o'clock in the morning, but I have seen people. Yes, we have to stay in early as politicians because we have to get to our charging stations. But anyways, it is a problem in the downtown, and I can say when I was with the RCMP for the ride along, we had 12 public urinations, which I caught 7 of them, and they said I should become an RCMP officer. The bad thing about this is I'm not looking forward to losing the revenue on the public urinations, but it's the better thing for the downtown.
Too much information. Anyway, I think we don't, Ms. Emmer, we don't have a... It has been moved and seconded. Good. So, no other discussion. Councilor McKay, are you back again?
I'm back.
You're still lurking here. Oh, okay, go ahead.
One of my colleagues said in the last year that we have wheelbarrows full of money to spend. And we're spending money like drunken sailors, $100,000 for a toilet. I can't believe this. Where's the outrage?
Okay. Councillor Anderson, you're back again.
Just one question to staff. So $100,000 is the only price that you can see this public toilet coming in at? Have you looked at Victoria and the past? Because that seems like a lot just for one use.
Well, from the research that staff are reporting on, there are cheaper alternatives and there's more expensive alternatives. This one is considered to meet the needs that we have the best, and that's what we believe it'll cost.
And presumably Portland and Victoria as well. Okay, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor? Opposed? We have Councillor McKay opposed, balance of council in favor. Motion passes. Bylaw with no accompanying report. 11A, that zoning amendment bylaw 2012 number 4500.034, RA 304 to rezone property at 1621 Dufferin Crescent from medium density residential R8 to hospital urban center CC5 to allow for a medical office and retail use be adopted. Moved and seconded. No discussion on this. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, as I was not at the public hearing, I will.
Didn't read this stuff? You don't have to.
I don't think he has to abstain.
I don't. Well, it's your call. But
He's read the information.
yeah, I would think so too. Mr. Holmes, would you like to make a comment? Oh, I'm sorry. Whoever. Now, that Ms. Samra, did you want to make a comment?
Your Worship, it's as long as the councillor who's absent from the public hearing reads the minutes and the information he or she is able to vote on the matter. But it's up to the individual to make that decision.
Okay, but then the decision whether they're in conflict on that, I'm not suggesting this is in conflict, but the decision would be up to the council. So I don't know if we can make him vote if he doesn't want to. No. Of course, we could have Councillor McKay go in and retrieve him, and then we'll... Anyway, I just want to move this thing along. So, yeah, all those in... Oh, wait, one. Now we got to get...
He's not informed on the issue, Your Worship.
Okay, that's fine. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Then moving into correspondence, none notice of motion. Move down into 15, other business. We did deal with the council appointments earlier on the three, and so does anyone have a notice of motion and then into other business? A motion from Councillor Brennan regarding the boat-based marina.
On the green pages, there was a delegation.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've gone back and forth. I made all my notes in white, and now we've gone back to green there again. So. Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, the only delegations we had Mr. Sorensen and Ms. Corfield. If you're in attendance, welcome. I think what we're going to do is maybe get my notes transferred onto the green sheets.
Secretary.
Okay, presentation.
Well, I just have a picture that I want to show at the end. Good evening. My name is Michelle Corfield, and I'm representing First Nations commercial fishermen today. I want to thank Councillor Bill Yoakum for being present. I want to respect and honor the Douglas Treaty of 1854 and thank him for allowing me to speak on Snuneymuxw traditional territory. Kleko, Kleko, Ichim Yoakum. And you won't be able to translate that. But anyways, with that, I want to thank you for listening to me today and allowing me to present. As I said, I'm going to present on a First Nations commercial fisheries perspective, and I think it's a perspective that you have not heard to date on the redevelopment. And then Chris will follow with the commercial fisherman perspective. BC First Nations are heavily reliant on marine environment for production and dissemination of their traditional food needs, whose access is protected under Canadian legislation, Section 35(1) of the Canadian Constitution. To coastal First Nations people all over Vancouver Island, fish obtained for FSC purposes are critical to ensure the community can continue to embrace, learn, and share the traditional cultural practices of feasting and providing for the whole community. The proposal to privatize and develop a new marina in the Nanaimo Harbour threatens First Nations access to FSC. Fish. It imposes unreasonable new operating costs whose effect will be to dislocate fishers currently using the marina on a permanent basis, reduces or stops temporary use of the harbour by transient FSC fishers, and limits the local community access to traditional food resources. The proposed plan has the potential to adversely affect or infringe the constitutionally protected Section 35(1) right of fishing and access to those fisheries. Before the project goes any further, proper consultation with the affected First Nation right holders is required. Public harbors and marinas frequently provide critical support to First Nations fishing operations. The much higher costs associated with using the new marina by commercial vessels will impose unsustainable financial costs on First Nations operating vessels acquiring FSC fish. It is important to first clarify that fish obtained for FSC purposes are quite different from fish obtained through a commercial license, which can be sold into the marketplace. FSC fish are not an income generator for First Nation fishers. Nations designate set fishers to obtain the FSC needs of the community. Traditionally, the fishers are from fishing family and have been charged with feeding the community for many generations. When fishers go out to fish for FSC fish, they do so not for financial gain, but for community gain. As a consequence, fishers and the communities are keenly dependent on public harbors and marinas to provide a location to store their vessels when not in use, and to serve as offload sites to ensure the FSC fish are available and properly shared within the broader community. Without a fair, public, and affordable place to moor their fishing vessels and offload their catches, First Nations fishermen are further disadvantaged and alienated from a fishing culture that is not only key to their personal well-being, but the overall well-being of the community through the services they provide. The new marina proposal will undermine the existing use of the harbour by First Nations commercial vessels. Some fishers require temporary or transient moorage to support longer trips for rest breaks and to offload perishable catches for their communities. The availability of affordable and commercial vessel-friendly public marinas is critical to ensure the safety of fishers and to support the integral needs of the Aboriginal fishing fleet and coastal First Nations communities. Our harbour is the only public transient moorage in Nanaimo. Finally, the new development will further alienate the local First Nations from their traditional fishing sites. At present, the Nanaimo Marina, as noted earlier, is an important location for the operation of fishing vessels fishing FSC fish for local communities. However, it also serves as a critical conduit or access point to the adjacent marine resources. Local fishers will not be able to stay in Nanaimo Marina because of insupportable costs. They will have to travel greater distances from where their boats are now moored to fish in their usual and accustomed fishing areas. The result will be that local communities will have less access to their traditional fishing sites, and in effect, they will be cut off from fishing locations that would have otherwise been available. We, as local commercial First Nations fishermen, ask that the city, through its elected representatives, do the right thing and officially oppose the proposed redevelopment until a fair and transparent process has been undertaken with all the stakeholders. To Cleco, and I give it over to Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Sorensen. I represent speak on behalf of the UHA Underwater Harvesters Association and the Commercial Fishermen of Nanaimo in regards to plans for the Nanaimo Harbour Marina. Okay, contrary to popular belief, fishing isn't a dying industry. In fact, most of the modern fisheries are both very profitable, very sustainable, and they pay taxes, especially. Okay. From all accounts, the proposed marina redevelopment was done behind closed doors with no public tendering process. Okay, this is a lack This process, or lack thereof, is a violation of the established public process of consultation put in place by our government to protect its citizens. We believe the NPA has disregarded the policies as set out in the Canada Marine Act and laws that govern them, but our main purpose here is to refute some of the gross misinformation about how the downtown marina serves the citizens of Nanaimo and its economic value to the city. Specifically, we want to point out the economic importance of the commercial fishery. This, when combined with the growing economic contribution from Protection Island, eclipses the benefits attributed to the marina as it has been proposed, i.e. make a new proposal. Okay, it's easy to overlook the significance of commercial fishing to Nanaimo. Nanaimo boats fish for salmon, herring, halibut, groundfish, tuna, crab, prawns, shrimp, urchins, geoducks, which is what we fish for. Okay. About 600 Nanaimo area residents, or 150 to 200 families, make their living from commercial fishing. That's from BC Stats. There are 40 commercial fishing vessels that use the Nanaimo Harbor, and perhaps another 30 that moor elsewhere in Nanaimo. And if you look actually on the MPA website, you'll see a picture showing 25 commercial fishing vessels, and that's only part of the harbor that's showing. It's funny that. In addition to Nanaimo-based vessels, there's a large visiting component during herring season, we have one example, where vessels that moor elsewhere come in, offload fuel, take on provisions in Nanaimo. They spend money. These are often larger vessels. They need transient moorage to conduct their business. Okay, present plan doesn't look like it would account for them. About 360 Nanaimo residents work full-time as commercial fishers, or about 18% of the total BC labor force of approximately 2,000 people employed in the capture fisheries, that being the wild fisheries in BC. Another 240 Nanaimo residents work in various processing and value-added industries such as smoking and canning. Right? The BC Seafood Alliance estimates that their members land products worth about $750 million annually, or about 90% of the total of the wild fishery catch in BC, is represented by the Seafood Alliance. Okay, Nanaimo fishers landed approximately 18% of that. Given this, their economic contribution to the province is about $112 million. Okay? Does any of this money stay in Nanaimo? Yeah, lots of it does. The total provincial employment income from the 2,000 commercial fishers in BC is about $90 million per year. Again, BC Stats. With 18% of the capture fisheries workforce of 360 living in the Nanaimo area, this would represent employment income of about $16 million. A significant part of this income relies on the downtown marina. Okay, this doesn't include the income from the other 240 Nanaimo residents working in the processing industries or other revenue generated from the transient fleets. In fact, some of the most modern, sustainable, and profitable fisheries are based in Nanaimo. Amongst them, our fishery, the geoduck fishery, which is pretty much a model example of any fishery in the world. Okay, these fisheries depend on a timely response to market. For us, that means we fish according to daily market conditions. We need to be able to land and offload at any time and on short notice. Okay? Given the present plan, that wouldn't happen. In short, we depend on the Nanaimo Harbor to have commercial access, ready access. Okay? And we can't overlook the economic contribution from Protection Island. For them, there's 200 homes, another 160 lots on Protection Island. Okay, it says an annual contribution per home is over $13,500. So there's another $2.7 million annually, most of which relies on the marina again. Okay, as I hope you understand, and as most commercial fishers and Protection Islanders know, the Nanaimo Harbor Marina is a valuable economic part of our city. But in actuality, it is more than that. It's part of who we all are as a community, okay? And this is true. But it's even more valuable possibly than I suggested. According to a more recent study in 2008, Gisselson and Associates in Vancouver prepared for DFO, for every dollar that flows directly through harbor operations, another 48 flows through the provincial economy from expenditures/sales by the commercial fishery, aquaculturist, another user, recreational boaters, and other harbor users, okay? Now, we'd just like to take a brief look at the role of the Nanaimo Harbor Authority. First, many of us, in fact most of us, appreciate some of the many positive projects undertaken by the MPA in previous years and their positive impact on the Nanaimo economic situation. They've definitely generated revenue. Right? Looking, though, at the Port Authority, we also recognize there's difficulties of complex management, but we also recognize there's some serious deficiencies in recent years. The Port Authority website is clear. They manage our harbour for the Government of Canada and on behalf of the citizens of Canada. It's a federal agency. However, we are the closest citizens, okay? It's not the guy living in Montreal. We're the closest ones. We need to reflect on recent history with the Port Authority. Some recent decisions made by the Port Authority have citizens questioning transparency, accountability, leadership. Okay, we question some of the financial ones. For instance, decisions such as investing $25 million into a cruise ship terminal, installment of a container handling facility. Okay, neither of these have really shown any real financial returns to date, and some of them may never. Okay, however, when we see financial statements completed by the Nanaimo Port Authority, it's showing the inner harbor is not being as profitable as it could be. Well, this is a management and leadership problem. It's not a reason to sell or lease out an asset. You can fix that. Okay, if the harbor was managed properly and marketed fairly, it's estimated that it could generate between $2.5 and $3.5 million a year. That much to the port, a lot more for the city. Okay, the port earns in excess of $40 million annually, yet they fail to see their social responsibility to the city. What we say is it's perhaps up to the city of Nanaimo to remind the MPA of their responsibility to the local citizenry. Okay. We have only one public marina. Okay, so I'll leave you with one final question. Okay, what does it mean to have a working public marina in the city of Nanaimo and to its future? You look around the rest of the places, look at Victoria, look at some of the other places. A working port is an asset, and it's an economic driver. A basic marina is just a parking spot. And thank you very much for your...
Okay, thank you. Did you have a question for this delegate?
Yes, I do.
Yep. So we have several questions before you disappear in the sunset here. Councillor Patchy.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you very much, Mr. Sorensen. Good presentation. I just need to clarify something for my own use. I have heard the Port authorities tell us that there are only 17 boats left that use the downtown boat basin for offloading commercial catches.
I have to ask where they got that from.
I'm asking.
That'd be the first thing. I don't know. There's more. Like if I go into more detail, just for our fishery alone, we had 85 vessel landings over 52 days. Okay, the Geoduck fisheries value. Landed value over $50 million last year. Okay, export value in the range of $70 million.
Just the number of ships. That's
ships,
my question.
I'd say that it looks in there. You go to prawn season, easily probably 40 vessels load and unload, because it's not like everyone loads and unloads every day, because everyone doesn't fish every day. Geoducks fishes quota fishery, halibut delivery, same thing. Tuna guys come in, they unload. It's urchins. There's a different, at different times, different numbers of vessels offload.
I got you. My other question, Your Worship, is for Ms. Cornfield, if I may. Corfield.
And it's doctor.
All right. Is any commercial First Nation fisheries being offloaded other than in the boat basin?
Daily in the boat basin.
Okay.
Are they being offloaded anywhere else in Nanaimo?
Yes.
No.
You're not? Because...
Not to my knowledge. I can ask Councillor Yoakum over there if he knows of any others, but not in Nanaimo.
As long as you don't. No, that's fair. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Dr. Corfield and Chris Sorensen. Thank you very much. Very interesting information. Is it reasonable for me to assume then when you're asking for consultation that you have not been consulted adequately with the NPA? Is that what you're suggesting? Has it not taken place?
There has been no consultation with the MPA. It's very, very funny, but no, there hasn't really been any. They've come back to us and said we could have a meeting with them to discuss what other possible arrangements might be made. However, the arrangements that they have not committed to are most likely very unsuitable, as in having small vessels unload in a port that requires 24-hour notice in order to unload. It's a secure export facility. We can't just go over to the port and go, you get a call in our fishery. We'll get a call from China. They'll say, okay, go out tomorrow, fish this much. Okay, so say we'll call it 500 pounds. You'll deliver 500 pounds. If you're done by 10 a.m., you'll be at the dock to unload by 11. that stuff will go to Vancouver, and it'll be on a plane that night going to China. That's how quickly we react to the market. It's the nature of the business now. That's where the real money is. And they've said basically, well, we might be able to do something for you over on by the Assembly Wharf. We might be able to create a space or something like this here. However, there would be no unloading facilities, so you'd have to get a crane truck to come in to do it. And on top of that, you'd have to provide so much notice that you couldn't decide. So if you got the word to fish, you get the word to fish literally sometimes in the morning, or the evening before, not in time enough to call them up and go, oh yeah, we need clearance tomorrow so we can come in and land. Oh, when are you coming in? Well, we'll be in, we don't know. We could be in at 11, we could be in at 2 o'clock. It doesn't work.
Thank you. Follow up, Your Worship. And just in terms of the per foot rate that the commercial fishing fleet is charged, is it similar to, greater than other ports within the coast or nearest to us?
Apparently, Michelle says Nanaimo is the most expensive in BC. It's not even about so much the cost of moorage. The funny thing is, the proponents haven't even mentioned, they will not tell us, even give us an idea of what the real cost of moorage will be. They don't say anything about it. That's interesting, they haven't mentioned it anywhere in their financial plan. And I'm sure they have a plan that says if we're going to recoup our money, we need to charge this much a foot for vessels to stay there. They haven't said a thing.
Thank you.
We can't say how much, whether it's too expensive or whatever.
And I'm aware that they have said it's a pleasure rate plus 30%, and that's according to what the Protection Island members have told me. And I say that because we all know if you travel on business as council members, you probably get the preferred provincial government rate. And I know if Mr. Dumas is traveling or any of the board of directors is traveling, they're traveling on a federal government rate. If you fly air cargo, you pay cargo rate. If you fly, doing business is a reduced rate. It's not a pleasure business, and we can't be compared. And especially in a First Nations fisheries where there is no money to be gained, you're doing it because that's your role within your community. You can't be charged a pleasure rate. We need to keep this public commercial access open because it's good for Nanaimo, it's good for citizens, it's good for Canada.
Okay, Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. The question was posed to you, Dr. Corfield. Were there any other areas in Nanaimo where fish were being offloaded? It has been brought to my understanding that there are SFN fisheries unloading at the adjacent to the cruise ship pier with HIAB operation.
That's why I deferred to Councillor Yoakum to see, I couldn't answer that question for him.
They have been accommodated?
The food fisheries being done at downtown, as other nations have been as well, being like Palau, Larka, neighbor nations have been using, and we requesting to use the one downtown.
Downtown.
Thank you.
That's good. Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation. We were told earlier today by the Port Authority that that there have been other opportunities presented to them by, for example, Stones Marine, that would like to accommodate the commercial fisheries. Now, I know that you have had you've been present at a number of the different meetings that the Port Authority has had. Can you tell me, have they ever tried to broker a meeting or introduce you to Stones, suggested there's an alternative or there's an opportunity for you over there at any time?
Not me personally, Chris?
No, they haven't. As a matter of fact, they have said that we can have a meeting with them, but they've already presented pretty much what they said in the tell us. We will go ahead and have a meeting with them. But as far as it goes at this moment, no other alternatives, nothing's been offered.
No accommodation.
And
thank you.
Stones would not be applicable for the job.
Thank you.
Okay, I see no further question on it. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, I don't know that we need that, but we'll take it anyway. Is there a second there? Delegation? Second. All those in favor? Motion passed. Now, we do have a motion that may address some of the issues, and I can read it, or if you want to. Okay. So, Councillor Brennan, it's your item is 15-1A. Maybe I'll just introduce it by saying the motion's from Councillor Brennan regarding the Boat Basin Marina.
Thank you, Your Worship. Whereas the Nanaimo Port Authority has a long and distinguished history of providing community amenities and public access to the waterfront, and whereas the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Port Authority have a long tradition of working together to provide valuable community assets, and whereas the Nanaimo Port Authority is working on a plan to upgrade and expand the small boat marina in downtown Nanaimo through a partnering with a private company, and whereas the public marina assets are valued by the community as historic and iconic features for Nanaimo that are the focus of much positive attention, and the city wishes to see this retained, be it resolved that the City of Nanaimo asks the Nanaimo Port Authority to ensure that the iconic values of the marina and small boat basin be preserved in the redevelopment, and that great care and attention be devoted to ensuring the public interest, including public and commercial access, is fully protected.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
Second.
Second. Discussion? Councillor Kipp.
Could you add is fully protected in perpetuity? As a friend?
In perpetuity.
So, yeah.
Well, that might, does that change the intent?
I think that's like forever and ever and a day. Yeah. I think we're asking them to ensure the public interest, including public and commercial access, is fully protected.
Okay, Councillor Kipp, are you going to have a go, or are you going to?
I think fully protected implies more than 10 minutes. I think fully protected implies exactly what it says, exactly the definition of the word fully, and that is fully protected.
Councillor McKay.
Thank you, Worship. For having first been introduced to Nanaimo in 1965, I can tell you that I've seen a lot of changes in the community, and one of the things that in life is that change is always, it's constant. It's one thing that's constant. Nanaimo has changed very differently. I remember the Greyhound station used to be down there, and the CPR and Smith's Meats down on Commercial. It's very, very different, and change will continue. What I'm most concerned about this one here, that there may be hidden in all of this a positive aspect to it. One of the things that concerns me the most is the disrespect, it appears to be, from the Port Authority towards Chief White's government and Mayor Rutan's government and the citizens of Nanaimo. And I would like to propose a friendly amendment to the motions and just add one word in bullet number 3, where it says, as historic and iconic features. That propose historic, iconic, and economic features. And in the next bullet, that would then go on to say, ensure that the iconic and economic values of the marina and small boat basin.
Is this, the seconder was?
Councillor Patchy.
And you're comfortable with that too? Okay, the mover is as well. Do you have the adjustment on it? Okay, great. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you, Richard. I fully support the amendment, and I fully endorse this council taking a leadership role with our First Nations partners and the commercial industry and the recreational industry to ensure that we protect and preserve the redevelopment to meet the needs as they are presented today. Fully recognize change is upon us. I don't believe that the Protection Island people and or the commercial fisher people are opposed to the redevelopment whatsoever. But I think what they are seeking is the assurance of their livelihoods, of their accessibilities to maintain their livelihoods without inconveniences, additional costs applied to them now and through the 30-year lease agreement that is proposed to be executed. So when we speak to perpetuity, I think what we would probably think, or I can't speak for Councillor Kipp, is making reference to the 30-year proposed lease agreement. And I think that the amendments give this a little bit more meat and teeth, and I think that the direction from us is and should be loud and clear to the NPA that we fully expect that those people that are impacted will also be protected. Thank you, Worship.
Councillor Batchie.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I shall be supporting this one as well. While I know that there are some people who would like to see something stronger than this, this, I believe, is a fair and equitable beginning of where we need to go. When I first went to Protection Island, when this issue came up, I was also told in no uncertain terms that Protection Islanders were not necessarily opposed to the plans that the Port Authority had, but they also pointed out very clearly to me that there is a huge difference between moorage and access. They are two different things. And as I have said on a number of occasions, if I lived on Protection Island and I had access almost through the goodness of the Port Authority for the last 20, 25 years, whatever, and that was changed from what still is an agency of the Government of Canada where you think as a citizen you have some access to get things changed. That becomes a very different story when a private company is going to be in charge. And even though the Port Authority has told us on a number of occasions that they have a say in what, in this case, Pacific Northwest Marina may or may not do, but that has not been spelled out for me in any clear form whatsoever. So that's also a point that I just want to repeat because it is really important. I'll just leave it by saying that a lease of 30 years that cannot include members of our own municipality who have mobility issues to get from one place in our municipality to another, who pay taxes, then I think it is incumbent upon us to do the best that we can. And I think, though this may be a small step, an expression of our concern, I still believe that this is a good beginning, and we will see what kind of reaction we get on it. I'm fully supportive of this.
Okay, I will also be supporting the motion, and I think it's important that the Port understand and realize that the residents and the commercial aspect haven't really been properly addressed, I don't feel. And I have some knowledge, having served on the Port Board. I was the chairman at a point, and I really feel that what they need to do, the Port, is to sit down with these people and make a better effort to resolve the outstanding issues, and I'm concerned that hasn't been done fully. And I know that Chief White has raised issues of concern, and again, that's another issue that needs to be resolved. The city enjoys a very good and close relationship with Chief White, and one we have a great deal of respect for, and we feel, and I feel personally, that there is a need that the interests of SFN are identified, and there's the principle of consultation, basic consultation, is important here, and I call upon the port to become more active in this regard and make sure that the issues outstanding with this have been identified, and also the residents and the commercial users also have a vested interest in the port, and I feel that they need to be heard as well. So to the port, please get more involved, listen to these people, and see if there's a better resolution available. Councillor Johnston.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be supporting it because I feel confident, absolutely confident, that when this lease is drawn up, there will be discussion and they will be interfacing with the users. I heard them loud and clear at meetings that this process will be undertaken, and I believe them. I believe that they will stand true to their word, and I feel in discussions with them that they have absolutely addressed the needs of the Protection Islanders for absolute sure in increasing the moorage space by 40% and having individual slips that they can access and acquire. So because I trust...
I think it's actually higher than 40%. I think they doubled the number.
They're creating 40% more moorage space for Protection Islanders. At any rate, because I trust, and because they've been such excellent partners in the past and have done so much good community service and in working with the City of Nanaimo, I will be supporting the motion.
Okay, so that's all the speakers on it. The motion on the floor has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion carries. We now move into question period, item 16.
My name is Fred Taylor of 204 Emery Way. After listening to the Ombudsman representatives and understanding the city is underway for engineering reports to deal with rehab of the colliery dams or removal, could the terms of reference be released?
Did we get that? Did you guys understand that?
Not precisely, no, Your Worship.
Pardon me?
No, we just had trouble understanding. What were you asking?
The terms of reference to your engineering firm for what you're looking for in the way of a report for rehab of the dams or removal.
Okay, well, I understand we've requested that information, and the engineers are now looking at that.
Yeah, and the terms of reference, to the extent that there's nothing in there protected under the privacy issues controlled by the engineer. In other words, if it doesn't affect him in a negative way, we have no reason why we wouldn't release that information. We would have to clear that with the engineer, though.
I would like to ask in garbage rates if we're taking food things directly to the recycling plant at Duke Point. I do see city trucks, garbage trucks going that direction, or are we dumping it still at the city landfill, which then has to be picked up and taken to the recycling place?
Well, Mr. Hickey might be able to provide that for us. Mr. Hickey?
Mayor Rattan, in answer to that, for several months we have been taking it directly to the Duke Point site, and now we're working with the RDN to have a drop-off right at the transfer station.
I understood that this was a large amount of the garbage going into landfill that's been taken away from the landfill, and if we're taking it to Duke Point, wouldn't that compensate any need for raising the rates, dump rates, because there's got to be less dumping at the...
Are you aware of this, Mr. Hickey?
We do take all the kitchen waste to the composting site at Duke Point, and we also take the garbage to the landfill. The rates at the landfill have been increased. The rates at the composting site are lower than the landfill, but I don't know what they are.
My point is, Mayor Rattan, is it was promoted for these new trucks to collect the food waste, and a large amount was then taken away from the Cedar landfill. So wouldn't that compensate a little bit of extra money for the dumping without raising our rates because of less going into the landfill? It's all going to Duke Point.
But I think there's the cost of vehicles and so on with the new ones that we're putting on there. The rates are set by the RDN, as you can appreciate, and
yeah, but I'm looking at we should be making less trips to the Cedar landfill if we're going to Duke Point somewhere else with the food stuff, which is supposed to be a large amount of what used to be garbage.
That's what the intent is.
Your Worship, we're certainly prepared to share the calculations with Mr. Taylor.
Good.
He's not trying to hide anything. There are tipping fees at the composting facility as well.
And we had quite a discussion about putting several trucks on the road to collect the food and that separately. And there was articles in the paper here just recently, and even to my house, garbage and food all together with old trucks. So what's the point of separating it if a truck comes around, putting it all into one bin?
Okay, well, Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you, to Mr. Taylor, if you go to bylaw 1591.03, the solid waste and recycling collection service rates and regulation amendment bylaw from the regional district, that will actually indicate for you the annual user fee comparisons between communities across Canada and comparable municipalities, and the reason why these increases have happened. If you want, I can email them to you as well.
I have that, sir. And my point, you seem to be going around that we might have been taking 100 trips in before when it was garbage and food. We might only be taking in 10 trips now, which is a tenth of the amount of trips, as an example. Therefore, even if you raise the dumping fees a little bit, you're still going to end up cheaper.
Yeah. I think staff indicated, Mr. Taylor, that they would provide that information for you and the actual number of trips. Yes, but we're getting it to go around here.
My next question is bathrooms at Diana Krall Plaza down here. I believe there's some Harbor Commission ones half a block away. We used to have one at the foot of Albert to service all the hotel stuff and everything down that end. Is this stuff here mostly because of when there's events, and could we not have the event organizer place several portable toilets for the event?
No. This is on a year-round basis, and it starts on a Thursday night. It gets a little worse on a Friday night, and it gets terrible on a Saturday night. But altogether, apart from that, I really firmly believe that a city of this size, of almost 90,000 people, needs to have probably more than one public facility that is accessible, that is clean, that can be maintained in a proper way, and is in the downtown core where there is a need for it.
We had one at the foot of Albert Street.
I remember, and I've had a picture of it. It's a beautiful building in front of where the vault is now. Yeah. I wish we could have something like that, but that'd be more than what we went for tonight.
And my last question,
Councillor Johnson, do you have a question?
Just with regard to the Nanaimo Port Authority washrooms, they are locked at 11 o'clock at night.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe we could work with them to open them up.
We'll add that to the list.
And keeping up with the public in our assets, when are we going to start using containers so you can get them pre-painted and everything else? The city yard could have a dozen out there in a new yard without a new big building, offices and everything in them.
Okay. Thank you.
Geraldine Collins, 110 Canterbury Crescent. Given Ms. Carter's presentation this evening, when might we expect the release of the minutes from the in-camera meeting regarding colliery dams?
It's Councillors. Go ahead.
It's at Council's pleasure.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Council's decision. It's a decision by council. It's council decision. We haven't made that decision yet. It hasn't been discussed by council, and maybe at some point in the future it will be. We don't have a date.
Okay, thank you.
Gord Fuller, 604 Nickel Street. Really appreciate the debate around the NPA and the motion, but could city staff repeat the motion as it was amended, because we're all a little bit confused back here.
Sure. Ms. Sempra, could you just do that first, please?
Thanks.
Whereas the Nanaimo Port Authority has a long and distinguished history of providing community amenities and public access to the waterfront, and whereas the City of Nanaimo and the Nanaimo Port Authority have a long tradition of working together to provide valuable community assets, and whereas the Nanaimo Port Authority is working on a plan to upgrade and expand the small boat marina in downtown Nanaimo through a partnering with a private company, and whereas the public marina assets are valued by the community as historic, iconic, and economic features for Nanaimo that are the focus of much positive attention, and the City of Nanaimo wishes to see this retained. Therefore, be it resolved that the City of Nanaimo asks the Nanaimo Port Authority to ensure that the historic, iconic, and economic values of the marina and small boat basin be preserved in the redevelopment, and that great care and attention be devoted to ensuring the public interest, including public and commercial access, is fully protected.
Okay. And Councillor McKay, I was going to say, the economic was the word you used. Was it good? Okay. Sorry, I had to ask a question.
Sorry about this, but I can't let a couple of these things go. First, Ron Boland, 3165 King Richard Drive. When will the updated budget be available in terms of the discussion tonight of asset management, which creates, as I understand it, raises taxes by 15% over that period?
He did resolve one and then the following.
Could you just clarify what it is you're looking for?
Pardon?
What is it? Could you just clarify what it is
I'm
you're
asking
looking for?
when the revised financial plan will be available that shows the 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%.
The financial plan as presented to council already contains those increases.
Yes, but I asked earlier if these increases for the asset management program had been included in that, and I was told they had not.
Oh, sorry, we had a misunderstanding.
Okay.
Yeah, what I meant to say is that they're incorporated already.
Oh, okay.
That's what I intended to say.
So actually, in a way, I think at the end of that period, we are reducing our expenditures in other areas to accommodate the 5% increase for asset management in that time period.
I'm not sure. No, we've actually just added in funding. We haven't accounted for specific expenditures other than those that were already in the capital plan. I hope that was more clear than it sounded to me when I said it. But we have not reduced regular operational funding.
Okay, I just don't understand how we could be paying 5% additional over our normal activities in 2017.
In each year, there's a 1% increase in property taxes.
But as I understood,
so
it was 1% the first year, it was 2% the next year, 3, 4, 5. That adds up to 15% over the period.
Oh, no. So we are not communicating clearly then. There's a 1% increase in each year.
Okay, so
that means by the fifth year, there is a 5% increase.
5% over the 5 years. Okay. That answers that question. I'm glad I asked it, so it's straight.
Councillor Brennan, do you have a point?
No, I don't have a question for the delegation. I don't have a question.
Okay, I'll take it.
Okay. On the deck and ramp at 499 7th Street, is there a time period which defines abandonment? As I understand, there was one there. It was grandfathered in. Would it not be possible to maintain that ramp without going through this procedure of a new, and if so,
let me just ask you a question. Well, I don't have a question for the delegation. I have a problem with the process. The delegation is asking questions of mayor and council to you. It isn't a conversation with our staff. And I mean, I notice when our staff speaks, even to answer one of the councillors' question, it is always through the chair, through the mayor. And I'd really like it if the delegation could discipline to do that.
I accept that, and I will try to.
I think it's just
try to face this direction.
It's respect for the chair of the meeting.
In any rate, that is the question.
It's my understanding.
Is there a period of abandonment? For example, if you take it down, is there after 6 months it's considered abandoned, and therefore you have no right to rebuild it without new process?
I don't know. I think the issue more isn't when it was how long it's been taken down, but when the new one was constructed without a permit. But maybe staff can elaborate on that.
That's the way I would interpret it. This isn't a use issue that would cease for 6 months. This is a structure on a building that doesn't conform with zoning.
So if I took it down the day after and rebuilt it the next day, it would be okay, but if I wait 6 months?
Wouldn't be okay unless you have a building permit. You have to have a building permit.
Okay, just to reconstruct it, maintain it.
It pre-existed because it was there for quite some time, and if you take it down and replace it, you need a building permit for the new structure.
Okay. Regarding the washrooms, which I hate to bring up again, particularly since I'm kind of dancing here myself, but I imagine myself at Mambo's Pizza and figuring I'm not going to make it to Diana Krall. And I was disappointed that I heard no discussion of the results that have taken place in Portland or Victoria in terms of reduction in these kinds of problems, or...
It's my understanding, and I heard from staff, and maybe that wasn't explained well enough on our part, and I apologize for that, but I think Portland, as I understand it, started off with 5 units, and they found it so successful, they added one more, and now they've added one more again. So I think there's 7 units, as I understand, in Portland. Victoria, to my understanding, has only 1 at this point. I'm not aware that staff or that we have followed up on it to find the progress to date, but I have no reason to suspect that they aren't pleased with the result.
I'm just wondering if there has been a serious reduction in these
fair question. We don't have that answer, I'm sorry.
It seems to me to be worth discussing. Yeah.
If I may,
well, you know the answer.
Point out that the majority of patrons that head for Mambo's Pizza would come past Diana Krall Place.
Okay.
Okay. They come from the other direction.
I mean, the idea is good. It's just whether we're an unending pot of money.
Okay. Councillor Brennan, do you have a point?
Yeah, I think so. The report that we got said that the temporary one by the parking lot on Bastion has been very successful. I am assuming that successful means a reduction.
Okay.
So yes, that was in the report, and that's one of the factors we took into account.
So there's some statistics from the police about how many fewer we've had. Okay, that's good. I'm just as disappointed I hadn't heard it. I think that covers it for me. Sorry.
Okay.
For taking the time.
Report, can we forward you the report on the 6 tests that we want?
I didn't see it.
No. Councillor Kipp said if we can get a hold of the copy, would you like to have one forwarded?
Sure, I'd appreciate it. I think most people would, because it's an important discussion. It's not a trivial matter. I quite agree.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you. I'm Frederick Collin. I live at 122 Pirates Lane on Protection Island. Lived there for about 12 years. Love it. Love the city of Nanaimo. I just have a few questions. I'm wondering, on October 18th, Kathy Davis brought forward this idea of a document that was signed by the Port Authority and the city of Nanaimo. It was a charter between the Port Authority and the city of Nanaimo. Are you aware of this now? You've all read it? Yeah. So there's one section of it here. It says, there's a bunch of sections that are really interesting. It says the City of Nanaimo regulates development and land use adjacent to the Port of Nanaimo. The development activities of lessees and tenants on properties controlled by the Port Authority are subject to a project review process, which was agreed to by the City of Nanaimo and the Port Authority. Has there been a project review process with the new project before us?
I'm not aware of it myself, but I don't know if staff has anything. I haven't heard anything.
Just that my interpretation of that relates to development proposals on the foreshore that require both city and port approval.
Okay. And one other question I have is, have all the members of Nanaimo City Council, Nanaimo City staff, and the Nanaimo Harbor Commission declared any and all business and or personal relationships they have or may have in the future with PNMG, members of the PNMG board, or PNMG shareholders? No?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay.
And I'm not aware of anyone having an association, but it hasn't been declared.
Okay.
We have to declare every year. We have a financial statement every year of any affiliations or any shares we hold, any real property, other than our personal residence, but we declare stocks and that and those things.
But that's more of a financial nature. I think he's asking for if we have a friendship or some kind of a relationship. Are you talking financial, or what are you talking about?
Yeah, there's something indicative in if we're going to have a hotel later on, and a city staff was a shareholder in that hotel development or whatnot in the future. That's kind of what I was getting at.
I don't know, maybe.
We don't have to.
All right, fair enough.
On a relationship. If it's shares, you would have to declare shares.
Okay.
Yes, if we would.
I don't think
but that's the city, not individuals.
Yes, staff are required to do that.
Oh, they do? Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, good.
See their ownership. So we get the big bucks.
Yep.
Keep smiling.
What's this?
Robert Fuller, 3350 Hammond Bay Road. Since the sale of the city annex has been approved, much to the benefit of the city taxpayers, pun intended, I'm assuming that all of the minutes from the innumerable in-camera meetings might be available soon. I realize it takes a motion of council to release these minutes, and I would like to ask that someone on council makes this motion to release these minutes, including the votes that took place during these many in-camera meetings.
I think in due course that will be done. It certainly won't be done tonight. We would need to get input from our lawyers before to see what liability there is on it.
Well, I don't think there's anything to hide anymore. And this is concerning the Diana Krall Plaza washroom again. I can certainly agree with Mr. McKay's point. And having worked in the downtown area in the late hours, the public facilities at the parkade don't seem to be really alleviating it that much. Maybe the Diana Krall space might be a little bit more available to people that need to go. My questions to council are, can council work with the RCMP to, instead of issue fines, or possibly as well as fines, have recommendations for community work, i.e., if you pee, you clean it up? And what is the yearly or monthly upkeep on said toilets? And since the taxpayers are footing the bill for these toilets and possibly the upkeep, could not the DNBIA be asked to pay for some of the upkeep? Sorry about that.
So I'm not, which one did you want first here?
What is the monthly upkeep or the yearly upkeep on these toilets? Do we have any
costs on that?
Our estimate is $10,000 a year.
$10,000 a year, which was the report.
Could somebody ask the DNBIA to pay their fair share?
I think it was discussed earlier. Staff brought that point up.
I asked the question. Sorry,
Yes.
Mr. Chair. I asked the question, and staff said that at this time the DMBIA has not committed anything to it, as they have other projects which they're currently undertaking, which would take away from the projects that they're doing.
Could they be asked to pay for at least the upkeep?
I would like that.
So would I. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, you fell out on your duties there. We stand adjourned.